The note arrived before the bride had been asked whether she was happy. It came folded twice, sealed in dark wax, and placed upon a silver tray between the chapel seating list and the little ivory cards that bore the names of half the highest families in London. Lady Honoria Selwyn saw it at once, because everything else on that tray belonged to the wedding she had spent 6 weeks perfecting, while the note looked like something that had slipped in from another life. Around her, Harcourt House hummed with the soft panic of important households on important mornings. Footmen moved through the hall with baskets of white ribbons. A maid hurried past, carrying a veil wrapped in muslin. Somewhere beyond the staircase, Mrs. Vale, the housekeeper, was reminding a junior servant that no guest of ducal rank was to be shown into the breakfast room before the Dowager Marchioness of Valleyford had been seated. Honoria stood beside the long table in the morning room, gloved hands resting over the final arrangement of place cards, and felt the strange stillness that always came when a woman was expected to be flawless. "My lady?" Mercy Pike asked softly. The young seamstress stood near the window with a length of pearl-trimmed lace over one arm. She was small, brown-haired and pale, with the terror of being responsible for anything connected to a ducal wedding. "Shall I take the veil upstairs now?" Honoria looked away from the note before anyone else could notice her noticing it. "In a moment, Mercy. The left edge needs one more stitch near the comb." "Not much, less than half an inch." Mercy's eyes widened as if Honoria had pointed out a crack in the dome of St. Paul's. "I am sorry, my lady. I checked it twice, then check it a third time, and no one will ever know there was anything to forgive." Honoria softened her voice. "You have done beautiful work." The girl's shoulders loosened. "Thank you, my lady. Beautiful work." Everyone had said some version of it all morning. The chapel flowers were beautiful. The ribbons were beautiful. The bride's lace was beautiful. The breakfast table would be beautiful once the sugared fruits, syllabubs, cold meats, and silver coffee urns had been set beneath the garlands. Even the weather had behaved beautifully, with pale May sunlight resting over Mayfair, as if London itself had agreed to be polished for the occasion. Yet no one had said, "Are you content, Honoria?" No one had asked whether His Grace Benedict Harcourt, Duke of Aldermere, had ever looked at her long enough for her to feel chosen rather than arranged. She was 24 years old, the only daughter of the Earl of Selwyn, and by noon she was expected to become Duchess of Aldermere, with the same quiet competence with which she had arranged the chapel seating. Her father had called it a blessing, her aunt had called it security, society would call it triumph. Honoria had learned to call it duty before anyone else had to remind her. From the doorway, her cousin Cecily Astley laughed lightly at something a footman said, while pretending not to notice that the young man had blushed. Cecily was dressed in soft blue, a colour that made her look younger than her 22 years and more helpless than she had ever been. She crossed the room with the easy grace of a girl who had never needed to be useful in order to be welcomed. "Honoria, you look as though you are preparing a treaty rather than a wedding." "A wedding between two families is often both." Cecily tilted her head. "That sounds very ducal already." "His Grace will be relieved." Honoria moved one card half an inch to the left. "I had hoped he might be more than relieved." The words escaped before she could recall them. Cecily's smile did not vanish. It changed, only a little. "Of course. I only meant that a duke requires a flawless duchess." The sentence settled between them like a pin dropped onto silk. It was not cruel enough to challenge. That was Cecily's gift. She could bruise without leaving a mark. Honoria looked down at the cards. The Earl of Selwyn would sit 2 chairs from Benedict. Lord Astley, Cecily's father, would sit farther down, though he had argued for a better position until Lady Westering herself had settled the matter with one raised eyebrow. Everything had been measured, balanced, and corrected. Everything had a place. "Then I must hope I have given him one," Honoria said. Cecily came behind her and lifted the muslin from the veil. "You have done more than that. You have made the morning look like a painting. Poor Benedict will hardly know what to say when he sees you." Benedict. Not his grace. Not the Duke, Benedict. Honoria heard the intimacy and told herself not to be foolish. Cecily had known him since childhood visits and shared summer assemblies. Half of London claimed some childhood familiarity with men they would never dare address so freely in public. Still, the name touched Honoria somewhere tender. She had been engaged to him for 4 months, and even in private he had never invited her to use it. Mercy came forward with the pearl veil comb resting on both palms. The comb had belonged to Honoria's mother, who had worn it on her own wedding day before death turned her into a portrait, a memory, and a standard Honoria could never quite reach. Tiny seed pearls curved along the top, like a row of captured moonlight. Honoria touched the center pearl with one fingertip. For a moment, the noise of the house receded. She remembered being 8 years old, standing beside her mother's dressing table, watching those pearls flash in candlelight, while Lady Selwyn said, "A woman should never marry merely to be placed. She should marry where her heart can stand upright." At 8, Honoria had not understood. At 24, she understood too well and far too late. "Let me," Cecily said. "I have steadier hands than Mercy at present. The poor thing looks ready to faint." Mercy flushed. Honoria should have refused. Yet Cecily was already behind her, sliding the comb into the arranged coils of her dark hair. The pressure was delicate, almost sisterly. "There," Cecily murmured. "Perfect." Honoria met her own eyes in the gilt mirror above the mantel. She saw a woman in ivory silk, calm mouth, composed brow, pearls fixed in place, and no visible sign that her heart had begun to beat as if it were listening for danger. Lady Honoria. The room shifted before she turned. Servants straightened. Cecily stepped back. Mercy lowered her gaze. Benedict Harcourt stood at the threshold in a dark morning coat that made every other man in London seem over-decorated by comparison. He was 32, tall, controlled, and built with the severe elegance of a man accustomed to rooms making space for him. His hair was black, his face clean-shaven, his expression unreadable. Dukes were not supposed to hurry, yet there was a tension at his jaw that suggested he had arrived against some private pressure. Honoria curtsied. "Your Grace, Lady Honoria." His gaze moved over her gown, the veil, the pearl comb, and returned to her face. Something in his expression altered so briefly she might have invented it. "You have been overseeing everything yourself." "Not everything. Merely the things likely to go wrong, if left to optimism." Cecily laughed. Benedict did not. His mouth moved almost toward a smile, then stopped, as if amusement were a door he had trained himself not to open in company. "A useful philosophy, a tiring one," Honoria said, then wished she had not. His eyes sharpened. For one suspended second, he looked at her not as a bride arranged beside his title, but as a woman who had spoken from behind the veil of manners. "Then I hope," he said quietly, "that after today, you may put some of the burden down." The words were not a declaration. They were not even warm enough to be called tenderness. Yet Honoria felt them with embarrassing force. Before she could answer, her father entered with a folded paper in his hand and impatience in every line of his body. "Aldermere, the solicitor requires your confirmation on the final settlement language before we proceed to the chapel." The small light in Benedict's face disappeared. Duke replaced man. "Of course." The Earl glanced at Honoria, not unkindly, but with the brisk pride of a man admiring a successful investment. "You look well, my dear. Your mother would have approved." Honoria smiled because that was what a daughter did when handed a compliment, shaped like an instruction. "Thank you, Papa." Benedict looked at her again, and this time she could not read him at all. "Until the chapel, Lady Honoria." "Until the chapel, Your Grace." He left with her father. The room exhaled. Cecily watched the empty doorway a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned with bright eyes. "There, you see." He noticed the comb. He noticed the arrangements. Men like Benedict notice what they wish to notice. Again that name. Again the soft claim beneath it. Honoria moved toward the tray because standing still had become unbearable. The sealed note waited where it had been placed, half hidden beneath the edge of the seating list. The wax was dark, nearly black, pressed with no family crest. Her name was written across the front in a strong hand that looked enough like Benedict's to make her breath catch. Lady Honoria Selwyn. She lifted it before Cecily could step closer. "What is that?" Cecily asked. "A note. From whom?" Honoria broke the seal. The paper gave off a faint scent of violets, sweet and powdery. Not strong enough to accuse, strong enough to remember. Inside only one line had been written. "Come to the vestry, before the bells." Be Mercy shifted near the window. Cecily's reflection in the mirror had gone very still, though when Honoria turned, her cousin was smiling. "How romantic," Cecily said. "Perhaps His Grace has found something more touching to say after all." Honoria folded the note once, carefully. A wiser woman might have called for Lady Westering. A colder woman might have ignored it. But the bride who had spent weeks arranging every chair, every ribbon, every expectation, could not resist the possibility that her future husband wished to speak to her once before the world claimed them. In the hall, the first chapel bell began to ring. Honoria slipped the note into her glove, lifted her skirts, and walked toward the vestry. The corridor to the vestry was narrower than Honoria remembered. Though she had walked it twice that morning to confirm the placement of prayer books and white ribbon along the pew ends. Now the space seemed to draw in around her, its panelled walls holding the distant murmur of gathered guests and the slow, solemn breathing of the chapel organ. The first bell had stopped. A second would follow soon. She kept one gloved hand closed around the folded note inside her palm and told herself that a bride was permitted one private word with the man she was about to marry. That was all this was, a word. Perhaps an apology for his coldness. Perhaps a final instruction from a duke who trusted procedure more than tenderness. Perhaps nothing at all, and she would laugh at herself in 20 years for having let a single line of ink make her heart behave like a girl's. At the turn of the corridor, she passed a footman she did not recognize. He was young, fair, and already turning away with his head bowed too low for a servant accustomed to a ducal household. His shoulder brushed the edge of her sleeve. Not enough to be rude, enough for the paper in her glove to shift against her palm. "Forgive me, my lady," he murmured. Honoria glanced back, but he had already disappeared through the baize door that led toward the service passage. A faint scent of violets lingered in the air. She stopped. The chapel organ changed notes beyond the wall, soft and expectant. Her name would be whispered in the pews by now. The Earl of Selwyn would be glancing toward the entrance, measuring each second as if it cost him income. Honoria looked at the closed vestry door ahead. Light showed beneath it. Voices moved inside. One voice was Benedict's, low and controlled, but sharpened by anger. "You should not be here." Honoria's hand tightened around the note. A woman answered, too softly for the words to carry. Then Benedict spoke again, closer to the door this time. "No. Whatever you think this will accomplish, it ends now." The sensible part of Honoria should have stepped back. She should have summoned Lady Westering, or asked a servant to announce her. She should have remembered that a closed door could turn innocence into scandal faster than any truth could rescue it. Instead, the note burned in her glove, the bells waited, and one word pressed against her mind until it became a command now. She opened the vestry door. The scene inside lasted no more than a breath. It would live in her far longer. Cecily stood before the window in her soft blue gown, one hand lifted to Benedict's lapel. Benedict had both hands at Cecily's wrists, not holding her close, but pushing her away. Yet Honoria saw only the angle of Cecily's face, the sudden press of her mouth to his, and the terrible stillness of his dark head before he forced distance between them. The prayer card Honoria had intended to give him slipped from her other hand. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Benedict turned. Color left his face so completely that for an instant he looked carved from the same pale stone as the chapel floor. Honoria. It was the first time he had spoken her Christian name. It struck her with cruel intimacy. Cecily made a sound like a broken sob and covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Her eyes were wet at once. Too quickly, some remote part of Honoria thought. Tears did not always come so obediently. I did not mean for you to see it like this, Cecily whispered. Benedict's voice cut through the room. There is no this. Please, Cecily said, turning toward Honoria with a face arranged in anguish. She had to know before vows made liars of us all. Honoria looked from one to the other. Benedict took a step toward her. Listen to me. She sent for me. She said you meant to withdraw and wished me to spare your father humiliation. I came to demand an explanation. That is all. Benedict, Cecily breathed as if his title had never existed. He flinched at the sound of his name in her mouth. Do not say another word, he said. The command was cold enough to stop most people. Cecily only swayed, one hand on the edge of the writing table. Honoria noticed everything, because feeling nothing was easier than feeling one thing. A prayer book lay open on the table, though the page was upside down. A blue ribbon had snagged on the corner of the chair. Cecily's left glove was missing. Benedict's cravat was not disordered, but his expression was. Most of all, she noticed the scent. Violets. Soft and powdery, the same sweetness that clung to the note. Honoria opened her right hand. The note was gone. Her fingers closed on empty silk. A cold line moved down her spine. She turned toward the corridor, but there was no sign of the footman. Her heart struck once, hard. Then the third chapel bell began to ring. The sound rolled through the vestry like judgment. Benedict reached for the door. I will address this before anyone speaks. Cecily moved first. She tried to slip past him, already sobbing, already lifting one hand to her face, as if prepared to be seen wounded by the entire church. Benedict caught her by the wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. No. Cecily looked at Honoria over his shoulder. Her tears shone. Her mouth curved almost imperceptibly, so small that no man in the room would have believed it if told. A lady cannot remain hidden after being compromised, she said. Honoria heard the true sentence beneath the spoken one. You are too late. Benedict released Cecily as if her skin had burned him. You arranged this. I'm frightened, Cecily whispered louder now, her voice pitched for the corridor. Don't be cruel. The door behind Honoria opened wider. A maid appeared, saw the three of them, and froze. The little gasp she gave was not loud, but it traveled. Another servant looked in from the corridor, then footsteps, whispered confusion. The vestry, which had been a room, became a stage. Honoria felt the mother's pearl comb shift in her hair. One pin loosened, then another. She lifted a hand to steady it, but the comb slid free and fell. It struck the stone floor with a delicate crack. Pearls scattered beneath the table toward Benedict's boot, across the hem of her wedding gown. One rolled to Cecily's feet and stopped against the pale blue silk. No one moved. Honoria looked down at the pearls. Her mother had worn them into a marriage of tenderness, if memory had not lied to a child. Honoria had carried them into a room where tenderness had no place at all. Lady Honoria, Benedict said, quieter now. There was something in his voice she had not heard before, fear. That almost undid her. Not Cecily's tears, not the kiss, not the open door, his fear. But fear had come too late to be useful. Honoria bent. Her skirt spread over the stone as she picked up the first pearl, then the second. She heard Cecily's breathing hitch, a practiced little sound. She heard Benedict take one step, then stop himself. Good. Let him stop. Let every person watching see that she did not need his hand to rise from the floor. Honoria, please, he said. Don't kneel for this. She picked up the third pearl. I am not kneeling for you, Your Grace. His face tightened. The title landed like a door closing. Honoria gathered what she could, though she knew some pearls had vanished into corners, where no bride could retrieve them with dignity intact. At last she stood. Her veil hung loose on one side, no longer perfect. For the first time all morning, that seemed honest. Cecily pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Cousin, I never wanted to hurt you. Honoria looked at her then, truly looked. Cecily's eyes were wet, but her breathing was steady. Her posture was fragile without being weak. She had dressed for innocence, and placed herself where discovery would do the rest. Honoria understood with sudden, terrible clarity that whatever had happened here had not begun with a kiss. It had begun earlier, with the note, with the violet scent, perhaps with every soft little sentence Cecily had spoken all morning. "No," Honoria said. "You wanted to be believed." Cecily's expression flickered. Only once. Benedict saw it. Honoria knew he saw it because his eyes sharpened with a fury so contained it seemed to darken the room. "Where is the note?" he asked Honoria. "Gone." "What note?" Cecily whispered. Benedict did not look at her, the one that brought Lady Honoria here. Cecily's lips parted. "I don't know what you mean." The organ beyond the wall swelled. Guests were shifting now. A low murmur travelled through the chapel, hundreds of polite breaths becoming one hungry animal. Honoria moved toward the door. Benedict stepped aside because he had enough sense left not to block her. "I will explain," he said. "Not first." He stilled. Honoria held the broken comb in one hand and the recovered pearls in the other. Her glove was dusty from the floor. Her veil was crooked. Her heart was not broken in a clean way. It was becoming something sharper. "Lady Honoria," Benedict said, "if you go out there alone, they will tear this into whatever shape pleases them. They already have witnesses. Then let me stand with you." She looked at him, and for one brief instant she saw not a duke, not a title, not the cold man who had spoken of burdens, but someone who had finally understood that control was not protection. "You may stand where you choose, Your Grace. I will speak for myself." Then she walked into the chapel. The murmuring died as she appeared. It did not fade, it fell. Lady Westering turned in the first pew, her sharp eyes taking in the loosened veil, the missing comb, the pearls clenched in Honoria's palm. The Earl of Selwyn half rose, his face purple with alarm. Beyond him sat rows of silk, feathers, polished boots, white gloves and lifted faces. London had come to see a duchess maid. It leaned forward to watch a woman unmade instead. Honoria did not hurry. She walked down the aisle alone, each step measured, the fallen edge of her veil brushing her shoulder. Benedict emerged behind her, then Cecily, who was weeping softly enough to be heard. That was when the first whisper broke. "Good heavens!" Another followed. Was she with him? Honoria reached the front of the chapel and turned. The vicar stared at her as though prayer had deserted him. Her father opened his mouth, but she spoke before he could claim the morning from her. "My lords, ladies, and honored guests," she said. Her voice was calm, calm enough to frighten even herself. "There will be no ceremony today." A sound moved through the chapel, swift as flame through dry paper. The Earl of Selwyn said, "Honoria." She did not look at him. Benedict stood 5 yards behind her, pale and motionless. Cecily gave one small sob. Honoria lifted the broken comb, just enough for the nearest witnesses to see the empty spaces where pearls had been. "I ask your pardon for the inconvenience caused to your mourning. Breakfast will still be served at Harcourt House for those who wish to remain under the guidance of the household." Lady Westering's brows rose, and something like approval touched her mouth. Honoria continued before courage could leave her. "As for the rest, I will not take vows while truth stands outside the door waiting to be invited in." Silence swallowed the chapel whole. Then Honoria curtsied to the vicar, turned from the altar, and walked back up the aisle. This time no one whispered, not until she passed Cecily. Her cousin leaned close, tears bright on her cheeks, and murmured so softly only Honoria could hear, "You should have let him speak first." Honoria did not pause. "That was your mistake," she answered. "You thought I would." By the time Honoria's carriage turned into Grosvenor Square, the wedding gown had become a witness against her. Ivory silk filled the narrow space around her, like an accusation too large to fold away. A smear of dust marked one glove where she had knelt on the chapel floor. 3 pearls lay hidden in her fist, warmed now by the heat of her palm, while the broken comb rested in her lap with its empty sockets turned upward. Her father sat opposite her and said nothing for nearly 3 streets. That silence was not mercy, it was calculation. Honoria watched London pass through the carriage window in brief, flashing pieces. A flower girl staring open-mouthed, a pair of gentlemen turning their heads, a lady in a passing barouche lifting her lorgnette before remembering not to be so obvious. News moved faster than wheels. By sunset, it would have crossed Mayfair. By morning, it would sit on every breakfast table with the toast. "You should not have spoken in the chapel," the Earl of Selwyn said at last. His voice was low, as though even the carriage cushions might gossip. Honoria looked at him. "Would you have preferred I take vows after what I saw? I would have preferred you give His Grace the opportunity to manage the matter." "Manage it," she repeated. The word tasted colder than betrayal. "Papa, I was not a spilled dish at breakfast." His jaw tightened. "Do not become theatrical. The Harcourt alliance is not a trifle. Your cousin has made matters difficult, certainly. But if you had shown restraint, the families might have controlled the narrative." Honoria opened her hand. The pearls gleamed against her glove. "I showed restraint." He glanced at them and looked away too quickly. "You showed pride." She closed her hand again. For years, she had mistaken obedience for virtue, because obedience was praised in daughters who cost their families little trouble. That morning in front of London, she had discovered the price of being convenient. A convenient woman could be moved aside. A convenient woman could be asked to wait, while others decided how much of her humiliation might be useful. "If pride is the only name you have for dignity," she said, "then I shall have to answer to it." The Earl stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. The carriage stopped before Selwyn House. The footman opened the door and froze for the smallest instant when he saw her torn veil. Honoria stepped down before her father could offer his hand. Inside, the entrance hall smelled of beeswax, lilies, and the faint lavender water used by the maids. It was her own home, yet it received her like a stranger returned under suspicion. Two housemaids paused near the stair. The butler, Mr. Crane, lowered his eyes with painful discipline. No one spoke. The Earl handed his hat and gloves to a servant with more force than necessary. "No callers are to be received." "Yes, my lord." "No one is to speak of what occurred." "Yes, my lord." Honoria turned on the first stair. "No servant is to be punished for what occurred." Her father's face darkened. "That is not your instruction to give. It is when servants are the first people blamed for sins committed above stairs." The hall went still. Mr. Crane's gaze flickered toward her, then away. The Earl took one step closer. "Go to your room, Honoria." The old command should have carried her upward. Instead, she remained where she stood, one hand on the rail, veil slipping from her hair like a ruined banner. "I will go because I choose privacy, not because I accept dismissal." She went up before he could answer. In her chamber, the fire had been lit for a bride, who would return only to change before the wedding breakfast. White slippers waited near the hearth. A travelling cloak had been laid across the bed for her departure to Bellwether Park. Someone had placed a small vase of orange blossoms beside the mirror. The room had prepared for a future that no longer existed. Honoria stood very still until Mercy Pike slipped in and shut the door behind her. The girl's face was pale. "My lady, I didn't know whether to come. I am glad you did." Mercy looked at the gown, the veil, the broken comb. Her mouth trembled. "I heard people saying things. Not the household, my lady." "The guests." "They said Miss Astley was taken faint at Harcourt House, and His Grace remained with her." Honoria had expected pain. She had not expected that shape of it. "Of course you did." Mercy shook her head quickly. "I don't mean to speak out of place. Only, my lady, Miss Astley wasn't faint when I saw her earlier." Honoria turned from the mirror. "When?" "Before you went to the vestry. She came through the sewing-room passage. She had a folded paper in her hand. I thought perhaps it was one of the place cards, but it was sealed. Dark wax. The pearls in Honoria's hand seemed to grow heavier. "Did she see you?" "No, my lady, or I don't think so. I was behind the linen press." "She was speaking with a footman." "Which footman?" Mercy swallowed. "I don't know his name. Fair hair. New, I think, not one of ours. The man in the corridor, the bowed head." The shoulder against her sleeve. Honoria crossed to the dressing table and opened her glove. Empty. She had known the note was gone, but seeing the empty silk pocket made the theft feel deliberate enough to breathe. "Mercy, did Miss Astley wear scent this morning?" Violets, my lady. Always violets. Honoria closed her eyes for one beat. Not grief. Not yet. Grief would have to wait until truth had been given a chair and forced to sit down. Help me remove the veil. Mercy stepped forward, gentle as a prayer. The pins came out one by one. When the broken comb was lifted free, Honoria saw the damage clearly. 3 pearls missing. No, 4, she counted again. 4 empty spaces. Yet she held only 3 pearls. 1 remained unaccounted for. Somewhere between the vestry, the chapel, and the carriage, a pearl had vanished. Honoria placed the comb on the table. If anyone asks, you know nothing. Mercy's eyes filled. They'll blame me if they wish to. My lady, they can say I loosened the comb, or that I carried a note, or that I let someone into the passage. No, Honoria's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it at once. No, Mercy. Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. If my father or anyone from Harcourt House questions you, you will say you are under my protection until I have spoken. Mercy stared at her, as if protection from a ruined bride were a strange and fragile umbrella in a storm. But who will protect you, my lady? Honoria looked at the woman in the mirror. Without the veil, she appeared less like a bride, and more like someone who had survived being mistaken for one. For the present, she said, I shall have to begin. A knock sounded before Mercy could answer. Not a servant's knock. Too firm, too impatient. Honoria nodded for Mercy to stand aside. The door opened, and her father entered with a letter in his hand. Behind him, in the corridor, Mr. Crane hovered with a silver tray, bearing a single calling card. The Earl's face had turned from anger to something worse, alarm. His Grace has sent both a card and a letter, he said. Then I will receive them. You will do no such thing until I have read the letter. Honoria held out her hand. It is addressed to me. The Earl did not give it to her. You have done enough harm by acting without counsel. If Aldermere is willing to repair the matter, we must not inflame him with injured speeches. Injured speeches, she said softly. Is that what truth becomes when spoken by a daughter? He looked toward Mercy. Leave us, Mercy curtsied. But Honoria spoke first. Mercy will remain. The Earl's nostrils flared. You forget yourself. No, Papa. I remembered myself in the chapel. The silence that followed was immense. Then the Earl broke the seal and scanned the letter despite her outstretched hand. Honoria watched his expression shift once, not enough for triumph and not enough for relief. He folded the page. His Grace requests a private interview tomorrow morning. With me, with the family. That was not my question. Her father's mouth compressed. For one reckless second she thought he might lie. Instead, he tore the lower half of the letter slightly as he refolded it. In that torn movement, Honoria saw one line before he hid it. I failed you first by delaying truth. The words struck more deeply than apology should have done, perhaps because they admitted failure without asking to be forgiven for it. The answer is no, the Earl said. Until I decide how we proceed, you will not correspond with him. Honoria lifted her chin. You may keep the paper. You cannot keep what I read. He stared at her, and for the first time in her life, her father looked uncertain how to command her. Mr. Crane cleared his throat at the door. My lord, Lady Furbridge has called, also Mrs. Anstruther, and the Dowager Lady Pemberton. They say it is a matter of concern. The Earl muttered something under his breath. Society had arrived with sympathy sharpened into knives. Honoria turned toward Mercy. My grey morning dress, no lace, no jewels. Her father frowned. You cannot mean to receive callers. I do. You are overwrought. No. I am observed. She walked to the dressing screen, then paused beside the sewing basket. Mercy had brought from Harcourt House in the confusion. A scrap of paper clung to the wool lining inside, nearly hidden beneath a spool of ivory thread. Honoria lifted it. It was small, torn from a larger sheet, and scented faintly of violets. No words remained, only a pressure mark where ink had once been written above it. Her heart steadied. Not healed, steadied. She folded the scrap and slipped it into her reticule. Downstairs, the first caller's voice floated upward, bright with false concern. Honoria looked once at the broken pearl comb on the table, then at the letter in her father's hand. The morning had taken her ceremony, her future, and much of her trust. It had not taken her mind. "Tell Lady Furbridge I shall be down directly," she said. "If London has come to watch me break, we must not disappoint it by giving it so little to see." By noon the next day, the house had learned to breathe around disgrace. Selwyn House did not become noisy after ruin. It became precise. Doors closed softly. Footmen crossed halls with lowered eyes. The silver salver in the entrance hall filled with calling cards that smelled of powder, rain, and curiosity. Lady Furbridge had come first, with a face arranged for sorrow and eyes bright with appetite. Mrs. Anstruther had asked whether Lady Honoria was too unwell to receive guests. Then looked disappointed when Honoria entered the drawing-room in grey silk, calm as a sealed letter. By evening, half of Mayfair had discovered that the abandoned bride did not weep on command. By morning, they had invented reasons why that composure proved guilt. Honoria read none of the gossip sheets, but she did not need ink to know what was being said. She saw it in the way her father held his jaw. She heard it in the way callers lowered their voices when Cecily's name was mentioned, as though tenderness belonged automatically to the woman who cried. The broken pearl comb lay in the top drawer of Honoria's dressing table, wrapped in muslin. The scrap of violet-scented paper remained hidden inside her reticule. 3 loose pearls sat in a small porcelain dish beside her gloves. 1 pearl was still missing. That missing pearl troubled her more than it ought to have done. A lost pearl could mean nothing. A lost pearl could mean everything, if it had rolled to the wrong hem, the wrong hand, the wrong pocket. She was standing beside the drawing-room window when Mr. Crane announced, with a stiffness that betrayed more feeling than words would have done, His Grace the Duke of Aldermere. Her father had insisted upon being present. Lady Westering, who had arrived 10 minutes earlier, without waiting to be invited, sat near the hearth, with a cane across her lap, and an expression sharp enough to cut through velvet. "A wise precaution," she had said, when the Earl objected to her presence. In houses where reputations are collapsing, witnesses become useful furniture. Benedict entered in black morning dress, unsmiling, controlled, and visibly tired. That last detail struck Honoria against her will. Dukes were not supposed to look as though they had passed a night without sleep. They were supposed to emerge polished from disaster and expect the world to follow their polish. Benedict bowed to the room, then to her. "Lady Honoria, Your Grace." No Christian name today. No softness borrowed from shock. His eyes moved once to her unadorned hair, as if he noticed the absence of the pearl comb, then returned to her face. "Thank you for receiving me." The Earl spoke before Honoria could answer. "We receive you because this matter must be settled." Lady Westering tapped her cane once against the carpet. "Selwyn, if you begin by sounding like a magistrate, the girl will have every right to leave us with the furniture." Benedict did not look away from Honoria. "I asked to speak with Lady Honoria because I owe her the truth before I owe anyone a settlement." Something in the Earl's mouth hardened at the word owe. Honoria folded her hands in her lap, though she had not sat. "Then speak plainly, Your Grace. Yesterday morning, shortly before the ceremony, a message reached me in the vestry. From Cecily, in her hand though not signed. It said you were in distress. It claimed you wished to withdraw from the marriage, but feared humiliating your father before the guests. I went there expecting to find you, or to find the person who had dared use your name in such a matter." Honoria listened without moving. The explanation fitted too well with the note she had received. That made it more dangerous, not less. "And you found my cousin?" "Yes." Benedict's voice remained even, but his right hand closed once at his side. "She said you had begged her to intercede. She said you were too proud to admit you did not want me." The words should have offended her. Instead, they hurt in a place older than yesterday. Cecily had known exactly which lie would sound plausible. A bride marrying a cold duke for family duty might indeed wish to run. A woman who had never been asked whether she was happy might indeed be desperate enough to whisper it to another woman. "Did you believe her?" Honoria asked. Benedict answered too quickly. No. Lady Westering's brows lifted. Benedict corrected himself with visible effort. Not entirely. Enough to remain, enough to demand answers rather than leave the room. That was my first error. Silence settled. The Earl looked impatient. Lady Westering looked interested. Honoria looked at Benedict and wondered whether a partial truth was more honorable than a clean lie. And then? She asked. She moved toward me. I told her to stop. She did not. When you opened the door, I had her wrists because I was pushing her away. Honoria remembered the scene as a series of knives. Cecily's hand at his lapel. Benedict's hands at her wrists. The press of her mouth. The shock of his face when he turned. From where I stood, she said, the distinction was not generous. His expression tightened. I know. That simple admission disarmed her more than any defense might have done. Her father stepped forward. Then the situation is clear enough. Miss Astley behaved recklessly, but scandal has already attached itself to all three names. What must be decided is how best to restore the families. Honoria turned to him. I am not a family crest, Papa. Benedict looked at her then with such sharp attention that the room seemed to narrow. Lady Westering's mouth curved barely. The Earl flushed. You will not speak to me in that tone before His Grace. That tone is the one left to me after no one listened to the gentler ones. Benedict said quietly, Lady Honoria is right. The Earl's gaze snapped to him. I beg your pardon. She is not to be discussed as a piece of salvage. Honoria should have felt gratitude. Instead, caution rose first. Protection given late could still be protection, but it could also be another form of ownership. And what do you propose? She asked. Benedict drew a breath. 48 hours. The words landed with a dull, familiar weight. Honoria felt the room recede. 48 hours for what? To secure the note that brought you to the vestry. Identify the servant who delivered it, and prevent Miss Astley from claiming a public injury that will force a worse lie upon us all. The Earl nodded at once. Sensible. Honoria did not look at him. You wish me to wait. I wish to avoid giving her the one weapon she lacks, Benedict said. If I accuse her this morning without proof, she will cry ruin. Society will say a frightened young lady was kissed, then slandered by a duke and a jealous bride. Your name will be dragged through every drawing room in London. It already is, not with my consent. Consent is not required for gossip, Your Grace. His jaw tightened. No. But power still has uses. Power had use yesterday. The words left her before she could soften them. Benedict went very still. Yes, he said. It did. Honoria stared at him. An arrogant man would have argued. A weak one would have pleaded. Benedict did neither. He accepted the blow, and that made it harder to deliver the next. Yesterday, I walked into a room and saw you with my cousin. Yesterday, I walked into a chapel and saved myself from vows built on confusion. Yesterday, I waited for you to say before God and London that I was not mad, jealous, or unworthy of belief. Her voice stayed calm. That was the worst of it. Calm carried farther than tears. You did not. Benedict's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. A little colour left him. Lady Westering looked down at her hands. Even the Earl said nothing. I was calculating damage, Benedict said. I know. I thought if I spoke too quickly I would make her appear the victim. I know. I thought control would protect you. No, Honoria said. You thought control would protect the situation. He took the words like a verdict. Outside the room, footsteps passed and faded. Inside, nothing moved. Then Mr. Crane appeared at the door with a small folded message on the tray. Forgive me, my lady. This was left by a boy at the servants' entrance. He said it was for Lady Honoria alone. The Earl reached for it, but Honoria stepped forward first. This time she took what bore her name. No seal, no crest. Only her direction written in a pretty slanted hand. Benedict's eyes darkened as he recognized it before she opened it. The paper smelled of violets. Honoria unfolded it. A single line waited inside. A gentleman cannot deny a lady he has compromised. She read it once. Then she handed it to Lady Westering, not her father, not Benedict. The older woman scanned it and gave a soft, humorless laugh. Miss Astley has begun her performance. The Earl took the note next and swore under his breath. This is intolerable. Benedict did not ask to see it. He looked at Honoria. That is why I asked for time. No, Honoria said. That is why you should have spoken sooner. His eyes lowered for one heartbeat. When they rose again, there was no defense left in them, only resolve. Then let me speak now. No servant in my household or yours is to be dismissed, threatened, or blamed for what happened. I have already given that order at Harcourt House. If your father objects, I will extend my protection formally to any person questioned in this matter. The Earl bristled. You presume authority in my house, where innocent servants may be crushed to protect guilty gentlefolk. Yes. Honoria had not expected warmth to move through her then. It was small and unwelcome, but real. Mercy, the fair-haired footman. The people who could be bought, blamed, and discarded while families negotiated reputations over tea. Benedict had seen that danger. Or perhaps Honoria had made him see it. She crossed to the small table near the hearth, where the betrothal ring had rested since she removed it the night before. It was a square-cut diamond in an old Harcourt setting, heavy with ancestry and expectation. She picked it up. The Earl made a warning sound. Honoria. She carried the ring to Benedict. He did not extend his hand. Perhaps he already understood. She placed it on the table between them instead. I will not wear this while the truth is being managed around me. Pain moved through his expression so quickly she nearly missed it. I understand. Do you? I am beginning to. Beginning is not enough for marriage. No, he said. It isn't. The contraction in his voice sounded human, and for that reason it hurt more. Honoria stepped back. You have your 48 hours, Your Grace. Not because you ask them of me, because I intend to use them myself. Benedict looked at the ring, then at her. To do what? To find the note that brought me to the vestry. That may be dangerous. For whom? He did not answer at once. Lady Westering did, dry as old parchment. For anyone who assumed Lady Honoria was merely decorative. Honoria folded Cecily's message and slid it into her reticule beside the violet-scented scrap. Benedict bowed, not deeply, but with a gravity that felt closer to apology than ceremony. Then I will not stand in your way. No, Honoria said. You will not. He turned to leave. At the door he paused. Lady Honoria, she met his gaze. I did not choose her. The room held its breath. Honoria felt every eye upon her, every rule of obedience, every wound of yesterday. Perhaps, she said. But you chose silence first. Benedict flinched, as if the words had found the exact place they were meant to enter. Then he bowed and left her with the ring on the table, the scent of violets in the air, and the first clear shape of a battle she would no longer allow others to fight in her name. The first rule of a house in disgrace was that every guilty object tried to look ordinary. Honoria learned that before the clock struck 2. The drawing-room had emptied after Benedict left, but the air still held the shape of him, the gravity of his bow, the sting of his final flinch, when she told him he had chosen silence first. Her father had shut himself in the library, either to write letters or to burn them. Lady Westering had gone with the promise that she would return if the fools multiplied, which Honoria suspected meant soon. That left the house between one wave of callers and the next, and in that narrow mercy, she went where no titled guest would think to look for truth. The sewing room lay at the back of Selwyn House, beyond the linen closet, and a passage that smelled faintly of starch, beeswax, and warm iron. It was not a pretty room. It had a long table, scarred by scissors, shelves of folded muslin, a dressmaker's form padded to Honoria's measurements, and a narrow window looking out upon the mews. Mercy Pike stood beside the table with both hands clenched around a roll of ivory thread. My lady, if anyone asks, you came here to inspect the veil. Then let us be accurate, Honoria said. Bring me the veil, Mercy obeyed at once. The veil looked painfully innocent, spread across the table, all lace and fine stitching, its edge repaired where Mercy had made the tiny correction that morning. Honoria placed the broken pearl comb beside it. The empty sockets seemed larger in daylight. 4 pearls missing, she said. 3 recovered. Mercy glanced at the dish Honoria had brought. Perhaps the fourth rolled beneath the vestry table. Perhaps. Honoria did not say the rest. Perhaps it rolled towards Cecily. Perhaps someone picked it up. Perhaps it was waiting inside a hem, like a witness too small to be afraid. She looked toward the peg rail near the door. Several garments hung there, covered in cloth. Honoria's travelling cloak, a spare morning gown, 2 altered bodices, and 1 pale blue skirt panel edged with narrow white satin. Honoria's gaze stopped on it. That is not mine. Mercy followed her eyes and went still. No, my lady. Whose? Miss Astley's. She tore a few stitches in the hem yesterday morning, and asked me to mend it before the ceremony. She said she might need to change after breakfast if the chapel grew too warm. Honoria touched the blue silk. It was the exact soft shade Cecily had worn when she stood near Benedict in the vestry, the colour of innocence chosen in advance. You did not return it. There was no time. After the ceremony stopped, no one asked for it. Lay it out. Mercy hesitated only a second, then spread the skirt panel across the table. The hem had been opened along one side. Honoria bent closer. A single pearl, no larger than a tear, was caught between the blue silk and the white satin facing, held there by one loose thread. The room seemed to contract around it. Mercy whispered, "My lady!" Honoria did not touch it at first. She looked at it as she might have looked at a person who had finally spoken after hours of silence. Then she took a pin, lifted the thread, and let the pearl fall into her palm. It matched the others perfectly. Same size, same old creamy luster. Same tiny flattened spot where it had once been sewn into her mother's comb. For a moment, Honoria felt no triumph, only a deep, clean sorrow. Cecily had stood close enough when the comb broke for the pearl to catch in her hem. Cecily had seen it happen. She had left the room with part of Honoria's inheritance hidden in her gown. Whether by accident or design, the result was the same. Even the evidence of Honoria's humiliation had been carried away by the woman who caused it. Mercy pressed one hand to her mouth. I didn't know it was there. I swear I didn't. I know. They'll say I put it there. They may try, Honoria. Folded the pearl into her hand with the others. They will not succeed if I can help it. Mercy's eyes filled with a gratitude that made Honoria uneasy. Gratitude was what people offered when they were too powerless to ask for justice. Tell me exactly what happened yesterday morning, Honoria said. Not what you think matters. Everything. Mercy drew a breath. Miss Astley came in while I was setting your veil in its box. She asked whether the vestry could be reached without passing through the chapel. I thought she meant for the flowers, or perhaps for a private prayer, I said. The service passage turns by the linen. Press and opens near the side corridor. Did she ask who would be there? She asked where a note might be delivered if one did not wish to trouble the family. Honoria lifted her gaze. A note. Mercy nodded miserably. I told her the footman carried messages through the baize door when the house was crowded. She laughed and said I knew everything useful. And the fair-haired footman, he came after, not 5 minutes later. I thought he was from Harcourt House. He wore their livery, but it looked newly fitted, as if it hadn't quite learned his shoulders. Honoria remembered the brush against her sleeve in the corridor, the bowed head, the way he vanished. Did you see him again after I went to the vestry? No, my lady. I asked Tom in the kitchen. He said the man was not seen after the bells. The missing footman had left with the note or after stealing it. That was no longer a suspicion. It was a path. Honoria turned toward the small writing desk pushed beneath the window. It was not her formal desk from upstairs, but she had used it for place cards, lists, and chapel revisions, while standing with Mercy over fabric and flowers. Several sheets of blotting paper lay beneath a ceramic weight. Did Cecily sit here? Only for a little while. She said she wished to help with the place cards. She dislikes useful labor. Mercy looked startled, then almost smiled. Yes, my lady. Honoria lifted the top sheet of blotting paper. At first it showed only smudges of grey and black, ordinary ghosts of ordinary lists. She held it nearer the window and turned it. There, pressed backward in faint lines, were fragments of words. Vestry, bells, the curve of what might have been a B. Not enough to convict a woman in public, enough to make Honoria's heart steady again. Cecily had not merely stepped into scandal. She had written its doorway. A sharp knock struck the open door frame. Honoria turned with the pearl still in her hand. Her father stood in the passage, his face white with anger. Behind him, several feet back, was Benedict. Honoria's breath caught before she could stop it. He had no business there. Yet he did not look surprised to find her in a sewing room, with evidence spread before her. He looked as though he had followed a trail and found the person he had underestimated already ahead of him. The Earl spoke first. "What, precisely, do you think you are doing, looking where no one else troubled to look? You are making servants accomplices in family disgrace." Mercy went pale. Honoria stepped between the girl and her father before she decided to do it. Mercy is not an accomplice. She is a witness. She is a seamstress. Then she has better eyes than the gentleman who stood in the vestry. Benedict's mouth tightened, not with offense, with recognition. The Earl pointed toward the table. "This ends now. You will go to Astacombe Hall tomorrow, and remain there until I decide your return to society can be managed. I will not have my daughter prowling through workrooms like a housekeeper while London laughs at us." "London is already laughing," Honoria said. "I would prefer it laugh before it learns the truth, not after it knows I was too obedient to seek it. Enough." The word cracked through the room. Mercy flinched. Benedict moved one step forward. "Only one, Selwyn." The Earl turned on him. "This is my daughter." "Yes," Benedict said, "and she is not your prisoner." The room froze. Honoria felt the words move through her, dangerous and warm. Her father stared, as if no man had ever contradicted him under his own roof. Certainly not on behalf of the daughter he had intended to command. "You exceed yourself, Aldermere, possibly. I should have done so sooner." Honoria looked at him then. He did not ask for gratitude. He did not even look at her while he spoke. His gaze remained on the Earl, steady and cold. "No servant in this room is to be threatened, dismissed, or pressed into silence. If Miss Pike loses her position for answering Lady Honoria's questions truthfully, she will enter service under Harcourt protection by nightfall." Mercy made a small sound, barely breath. The Earl's face darkened. "You would interfere in my household. I would prevent a poor woman from paying for a rich one's lie." Honoria held up the pearl before either man could claim the moment. "This was found in the hem of Miss Astley's blue skirt panel. Mercy did not place it there. I did not know it was there. It came from my mother's comb, which broke in the vestry." Benedict looked at the pearl. Something moved across his face with such restraint that it was almost worse than open emotion. "May I see the hem?" Honoria nodded. He approached the table, careful not to come too near her. That care mattered. She wished it did not. His gaze moved from the hem to the blotting paper, then to the scrap of violet-scented paper Honoria had drawn from her reticule and placed beside the comb. "You found more than a pearl, enough to know the note was not born in the vestry." Benedict looked at her fully then. "No. It was prepared before either of us reached it." The Earl's anger faltered beneath the shape of evidence. "This proves nothing that can be said aloud." "Not yet," Honoria agreed. "That is why I am not finished." "You are finished when I say you are." "No, Papa." Her voice did not rise. That arrangement ended in the chapel. The silence after that was not empty. It was full of new boundaries. Benedict took the folded blotting paper from the table, only after Honoria gave a slight nod. "The fair-haired footman is missing," she said. "He brushed against me outside the vestry. The note vanished after that. I will find him. I did not ask you to take this from me. I know." Benedict folded the blotting paper carefully. "I am asking permission to search where you cannot go without further scandal." That was different. Honoria hated that it was different. She hated even more that she trusted the distinction. "Permission is not surrender," she said. "No," Benedict replied. "It isn't." The contraction, soft and human, passed between them like a bridge neither had agreed to cross. "Mr. Crane appeared at the passage door, holding a square envelope on a salver. His expression had returned to the formal sorrow of a butler serving tea during an earthquake. My lady, this has arrived from Lady Westering's house. Honoria took it. The paper was thick, the seal unmistakable. Inside lay a note in Lady Westering's sharp hand, and beneath it, a voucher for Almac's assembly rooms. The message was brief. If London insists upon judging you, my dear, choose the room in which it must do so properly. Honoria read it once. Then she looked at the pearl in her palm, the blue hem on the table, her father's fury, Mercy's frightened hope, and Benedict's guarded face. The battle had acquired a ballroom. It seems, Honoria said, closing the envelope, that I am expected at Almac's. Lady Westering received scandal the way other women received tea, with steady hands and no wasted surprise. Her drawing room in Brook Street was not the largest in Mayfair, but it had a reputation for making people tell the truth before they had planned to do so. The chairs were placed close enough for conversation and far enough apart to prevent impropriety. The curtains were open to the mild afternoon light. A silver tray rested near the door, already bearing the calling card His Grace the Duke of Aldermere had sent ahead of him, face up where any visitor with eyes could see it. Honoria noticed that at once. A calling card could be a courtesy, a signal, or a weapon. Lady Westering had made it all three. Sit where the light reaches you, my dear, the older lady said. People are less likely to call a woman deceitful when they can see she is tired. Honoria sat, though she did not smile. The past 24 hours had taken something from her face that powder could not restore. Her grey silk gown was plain, chosen deliberately, no lace, no pearls. No attempt to appear bridal, wounded, or brave. Mercy had pinned her hair without ornament that morning, and had done it with such trembling care that Honoria had touched her hand and said, "You are not on trial." Mercy had answered, "It feels as if everyone honest is, my lady." That sentence stayed with Honoria now as Lady Westering poured tea strong enough to revive the dead and punish the living. The evidence lay in a small reticule beside Honoria's chair. The recovered pearls, the violet-scented scrap, and the blotting paper from the sewing room. The pearl found in Cecily's hem remained wrapped separately, not because it mattered more, but because Honoria could not yet bear to hear it click against the others. "Your father is displeased that you are here," Lady Westering said. "My father is displeased that I remain visible, then remain visible with posture. It offends them more." The butler opened the door. His Grace the Duke of Aldermere. Benedict entered without the armor of a crowd around him. That should not have made a difference. It did. At Selwyn House, he had been a duke confronting another nobleman. Here, in Lady Westering's drawing room, under the sharp eye of a woman too old to flatter power, he looked like a man who had come to be judged and knew it. He bowed first to Lady Westering, then to Honoria. "Lady Honoria, Your Grace." Lady Westering lifted her teacup. "There. We have survived the titles. Sit down, Aldermere, and do not hover like a guilty monument." A flicker crossed Benedict's face. It might have been amusement if the room had been kinder. He sat opposite Honoria, leaving more space between them than society required. She noticed. She wished she had not. Lady Westering placed a cup before him. "You requested a chaperoned interview and brought papers. That is either honorable or tedious. Pray be the former." Benedict withdrew a folded sheet from his coat. "A sample of my hand, written this morning in your presence if you require it." "I require everything," Lady Westering said. He accepted that with a nod and placed the sheet on the table between them, not pushing it toward Honoria. "The note you received was not mine. I know that now," Honoria said. "Knowing is not the same as proving." "No." His voice was quiet. "It isn't." Lady Westering's eyes moved from one to the other. "Good. The two of you have begun with a fact. Continue before society recovers from the shock." Honoria opened her reticule and drew out the blotting paper. Benedict's gaze sharpened, but he did not reach for it. She appreciated that restraint more than she wanted to. "This came from the sewing room desk," she said. "Mercy saw Cecily there before the ceremony. The impressions are faint." Benedict leaned forward only as far as courtesy allowed. "May I?" Honoria hesitated, then handed it to him. His fingers did not brush hers. He took the page as if it were something breakable and held it near the window. For several seconds, no one spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked with insulting calm. Vestry, he said. Bells. The curve of a capital B. Enough to trouble, Lady Westering said. Not enough to hang a reputation upon. Benedict looked to Honoria. Did the note use those exact words? She had not wanted to repeat them. They had become a corridor, a door, a scene she could not step out of. Come to the vestry before the bells. B. Benedict's hand closed slightly over the blotting paper. The message I received used the same phrase. Honoria became very still. Before that phrase was ours. Benedict looked at her. Yours, mine, and Cecily's. When we were children at Astercombe, we used to race to the chapel ruins before the supper bell. Whoever arrived first would say it. Before the bells, she heard how small the memory sounded once spoken. Small things made intimate weapons. Cecily had reached backward into childhood and pulled out a phrase Honoria would follow without questioning, because it carried the scent of trust. The room blurred for half a second, not with tears, but with the shock of recognizing how long a betrayal might have been rehearsed by envy. Benedict saw it. His hand moved, then stopped on the arm of his chair. He did not offer comfort he had not earned. Instead, he said, I am sorry. Honoria looked at him. For the note, for believing, even for a moment, that anything spoken in your name should be weighed by anyone but you. For remaining in that room. For thinking I could master the consequences after failing the moment. Lady Westering lowered her cup very softly. Benedict continued, and now the words seemed to cost him. I have been trained all my life to protect a name, a house, a title. Yesterday I tried to protect the situation. I did not protect you. I won't pretend otherwise. His voice used the contraction, plain and human, and Honoria felt it settle where grander apologies would have slid away. She had imagined anger would keep her safe. Yet anger, when met with honesty, lost the clean edges that made it easy to hold. You spoke in Selwyn House for mercy, she said. I should have done so because it was right, not because you forced me to see it. I did not force you, yes, he said. You did, not with command. With example. Lady Westering made a small approving sound. A rare thing, Aldermere. A man admitting instruction from a woman in the same room where both can hear it. Honoria almost smiled. Almost. Benedict drew another paper from his coat. My steward has begun inquiries regarding the fair-haired footman. He was not a permanent Harcourt servant. He was hired for the wedding day through an agency often used when great houses require additional hands. His name was given as Thomas Reed, though I suspect it false. He vanished before the wedding breakfast. Honoria listened, but her mind fixed on one detail. Additional hands. Cecily would have known the house was too crowded for anyone to question a new face. Yes, and she asked Mercy how notes moved through service passages. Then she used a servant's invisibility against you. Bennett's jaw tightened, and against him. Honoria looked up. That mattered. The unknown footman had taken the note, perhaps for money, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because people with few choices often sold the only small power offered to them. But he too could vanish into blame if the great families required someone low enough to crush. If you find him, she said, he is not to be frightened into saying what serves you. Benedict met her eyes. Agreed. Nor what serves me. Agreed. Truth first, Honoria said. Then we shall see what remains. Something changed in his face, not relief. He was too intelligent for that. Permission was not forgiveness, and he knew the difference now. Truth first, he repeated. Lady Westering rose and crossed to the tray by the door. She lifted Benedict's calling card between two fingers. This will remain here until this evening. I expect 3 visitors before dinner, each more curious than the last. They will see it and carry the sight into every drawing room, foolish enough to pretend not to care. Honoria understood. You mean for London to know His Grace called here while you were present? I mean for London to know. I am not afraid to have his card beside yours. Benedict looked at Lady Westering. That may draw criticism upon you. My dear Duke, I have buried 2 husbands, refused 3 proposals, outlived 5 scandals, and insulted a prince by accident only once. Criticism would have to arrive armed to impress me. This time Honoria did smile. It was brief, but Benedict saw it. The warmth in his eyes disappeared, almost as soon as it came, restrained by the space between them. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew something small, wrapped in white linen. There is one more thing. Honoria's breath caught before he opened it. Inside lay the pearl he had taken from the sewing room table the day before, cleaned and set beside a thin twist of silver thread. I asked a jeweler whether the comb could be repaired without altering the original setting. He said it can. I did not leave it with him. I would not presume. He placed the linen on the table, halfway between them. This belongs to you. Honoria looked at the pearl. Her mother's comb had seemed only broken since the chapel. Now, for the first time, broken appeared different from destroyed. Thank you, she said. The words were small because anything larger would have been unsafe. Benedict bowed his head. Lady Honoria, I will not ask you to trust me today. No, but I would like to earn the right to ask. The room stilled around that sentence. It was not a proposal. It was not even a plea. It was a man used to command asking to be measured by conduct instead of rank. Honoria picked up the linen and folded it over the pearl. Then earn it without expecting me to watch kindly. I can do that. And without deciding what is best for me before I have spoken. I am learning that lesson. Learn faster, Lady Westering said. Benedict inclined his head. I shall try. A footman entered with another card, and Lady Westering read it with a look of predatory amusement. Lady Furbridge. Excellent. The vultures are punctual. She turned to Honoria. You will attend Almack's tomorrow night. Not because they deserve your presence. Because retreat allows fools to decorate absence with lies. Honoria thought of the chapel aisle, the whispers, Cecily's tears, her father's command to disappear. Then she placed Benedict's handwriting sample beside the blotting paper and closed her reticule. Then I will attend. Benedict stood. If you permit it, I will be there. Honoria rose as well. Do not mistake proximity for pardon. I won't. Their eyes held for one measured breath. Then Lady Westering's butler announced Lady Furbridge in a voice so solemn it might have been a funeral. Honoria turned toward the door, shoulders straight. London had asked for a spectacle. Tomorrow it would receive a witness. Almack's had never looked more polite or more merciless. Its chandeliers burned with disciplined brightness above a room full of satin, white gloves, measured bows, and smiles trained not to reveal hunger. Honoria entered on Lady Westering's arm shortly after 10, not because she was late, but because Lady Westering had declared that arriving too early allowed gossip to warm its hands before the fire. The assembly rooms paused when they saw her. No one turned fully, no one stared like a fishwife at market. That would have been vulgar. Instead, fans slowed, conversations thinned. Young ladies looked past her shoulder, as if some fascinating architectural feature had appeared near the door. Matrons glanced at her unadorned hair, her plain silver-grey gown, and the absence of any pearl comb. Gentlemen who had once bowed with easy respect now bowed with cautious curiosity, as though ruin might transfer by eye contact. Honoria kept her shoulders level. She had not come to be pitied. She had not come to explain herself in corners. She had come because absence would be filled with lies, and she had learned in one chapel morning how quickly other people decorated silence. Breathe, Lady Westering said without moving her lips. They are less frightening when one remembers most of them are bored. I am breathing. You are breathing like a martyr in a painting. Try to breathe like a woman who has seen worse rooms than this. Honoria almost smiled. That nearly cost her composure more than cruelty would have done. Across the room, Benedict stood near a pillar with Lord Haversham and two older gentlemen whose opinions often travelled faster than newsprint. He wore black, as he had worn at Selwyn House, but tonight the colour seemed less like mourning and more like a line drawn around him. When his gaze found Honoria, he did not rush toward her. He bowed, deep enough for every watcher to notice, restrained enough not to claim what had not been restored. The room noticed anyway, A fan snapped open near the lemonade table. "Good," Lady Westering murmured. "Let them choke on etiquette." Honoria inclined her head in answer to Benedict and moved forward. The first wave came in the shape of Lady Furbridge, who appeared beside them with pearls at her throat and sympathy sharpened to a needle. "My dear Lady Honoria, how brave of you to come. I confess I feared you would be quite unequal to society so soon." "That would have been inconvenient," Honoria said. "I had already accepted Lady Westering's escort." Lady Furbridge blinked. Lady Westering sipped lemonade as if this were delightful weather. "There has been such confusion," Lady Furbridge continued. "One hears the most distressing things. I am certain no one knows what to believe." "Then how fortunate," Honoria replied. "That belief is not required before a country dance." Lady Furbridge's smile thinned. Before she could answer, a movement near the entrance drew the room's attention the way a draught draws candle flame. Cecily Astley had arrived. She wore pale blue again, softer than the first dress, with a white shawl drawn around her shoulders, and her face arranged in delicate exhaustion. Her father, Lord Astley, stood beside her with the grave expression of a man presenting an injured lamb to wolves he intended to accuse. Cecily did not look directly at Honoria. That was the genius of it. She let her eyes tremble near Honoria and fall away, as if even the sight of her cousin caused pain too noble to display. A murmur passed through the room. Compassion loved a woman who looked fragile. It did not always know what to do with a woman who stood upright. Honoria felt Lady Westering's grip tighten once on her arm. "Do not react," the older lady said softly. "Make her work harder." Then the paper appeared. It moved through the room in the hand of a young gentleman who should have had the sense to hide it and did not. A gossip sheet, freshly printed, folded small enough to pass from glove to glove. Honoria saw the black heading only when it reached Mrs. Anstruther, and opened like a little flag of execution. A bride's terror before the bells. Beneath it, several lines had been underlined in pencil. Lady Honoria Selwyn, long rumoured reluctant before her elevation, is said to have imagined a tenderness between his grace and another lady where only family comfort existed. Those who know the disappointed bride describe a proud reserve often mistaken for dignity. The words did not strike all at once. They entered like cold water through the seams of a gown. Imagined. Reluctant. Proud. Mistaken for dignity. Cecily had not simply claimed tears. She had offered London a story in which Honoria's composure became proof against her, and her pain became vanity. Lady Westering took the sheet from Mrs. Anstruther's hand before the woman could hide it. She read one line, then two, then folded it with crisp contempt. "Poor prose," she said. "Always a sign of poor morals. A few people heard and pretended not to." Cecily's gaze flicked toward them. For one brief instant, the wounded softness vanished. Then she lowered her lashes again and turned to speak with a patroness. Honoria's hand tightened around her fan. She thought of the blotting paper in Lady Westering's keeping. The phrase before the bells, the pearl in the blue hem. Evidence existed, but evidence did not dance. Gossip did. It moved with music, dipped at the right moments, and smiled while it ruined. The first set began. Couples arranged themselves beneath the watchful eyes of chaperones. Honoria was not asked. That, too, was a statement. A week earlier, men would have considered it an honor to stand up with the future Duchess of Aldermere. Tonight, they feared choosing a side before the winning story had been confirmed. She told herself she did not care. Then she felt the care anyway, sharp and humiliating. Lady Westering leaned close. "Stand still. Retreat is blood in water." Honoria obeyed. The music lifted. Cecily moved across the room with careful steps and paused beside a small table where dance cards had been left. Her hand trembled. A folded paper slipped from her reticule and fell to the floor. She gave a little gasp, the sort that summoned witnesses without ever calling for them. Lord Havisham bent to retrieve it, but the paper had opened enough for others to see the slant of a masculine-looking hand. "My lady," he said awkwardly. Cecily snatched it back too late. Lady Furbridge whispered, "A letter." Mrs. Anstruther whispered, "From whom?" Cecily pressed the paper to her breast. Please. It isn't what you think. No sentence in London ever ensured people thought the worst more swiftly. Honoria's stomach tightened. Benedict had crossed half the room before the whispers could grow teeth. He stopped not beside Cecily, but beside Honoria. That choice struck the assembly with more force than a shout. Lady Honoria, he said, bowing, will you honor me with the next dance? 100 eyes found her. The room waited for gratitude, collapse, triumph, refusal. Honoria looked at Benedict. His face revealed little, but his eyes held a question, not a command. Still, the room would see performance if she let it. She stepped closer, keeping her voice low enough for him alone. Do not use me as proof of your innocence. His expression tightened. I won't. If this is protection arranged for witnesses, I would rather stand alone. Then stand alone if you choose. I am asking because I should have asked before assuming. The music ended. Applause rose, thin and polite. Honoria felt the weight of every gaze on her plain gown, her bare hair, her empty dance card. Benedict waited. He did not reach for her hand. He did not smile for the room. He gave her the only power he could give in that moment. Refusal, that was why she accepted. One dance, Your Grace. He bowed again, and this time the murmur that crossed the room could not be disguised as conversation. As they took their places, Honoria saw Cecily, watching them with tears standing unused in her eyes. Lord Astley spoke sharply into her ear. Cecily lowered her head, but her hand clutched the folded letter. The first steps required space and order. Honoria moved through them with the precision drilled into every girl, expected to become an ornament before she became a wife. Benedict matched her without crowding her. The distance between their hands felt more intimate than touch would have done, because restraint had become the only language she trusted. The letter she dropped, Honoria said as they turned. Not mine, Benedict answered. The hand, an imitation, perhaps. Crude from a distance, dangerous from across a room. It used Selwyn wax, his gaze sharpened. You saw that. Red with a narrow gold fleck. My father orders it from the same stationer every season. Then she wanted you to see. No. She wanted everyone else to almost see. Benedict's eyes moved past her shoulder. Lord Marset is repeating the gossip sheet near the card room. Then London is efficient tonight. His mouth hardened. He called your composure unnatural. Honoria missed half a step. Benedict adjusted at once, covering the error so smoothly that only she knew it had happened. That small mercy nearly broke through her anger. Did he? Yes. And what will you do? Demand he admire my natural suffering instead? No, Benedict said. I will correct him. When the figure brought them near the edge of the set, Lord Marset stood close enough to be heard by those around him. A woman so calm at the altar may have been relieved to escape it. Benedict stopped. Not dramatically. Not enough to disrupt the set beyond repair. Just enough that silence spread from the nearest couples outward. He turned his head. Lord Marset, Lady Honoria's composure is not guilt. It is breeding you would do well to learn before speaking her name again. The words landed cleanly. No raised voice. No vulgar threat. Only ducal authority applied with surgical precision. Lord Marset went scarlet. Lady Westering looked openly pleased. Cecily's fingers tightened over her letter until the paper bent. The music pulled Benedict and Honoria back into motion. For several measures, she could not speak. Protection had come late. It still came. That was the difficulty. You should not have done that for my sake, if it harms yours, she said. I did it for truth's sake. Yours happens, that sounds rehearsed. It wasn't. The contraction was quiet, almost rueful. I have rehearsed many things in my life, Lady Honoria. Unfortunately, most of them were less useful than silence at the wrong time. She looked at him then, despite herself. You admit that easily now. There is nothing easy about it. The dance turned them beneath the chandelier light. For an instant, the room blurred into silk and gold, and there was only the man before her, the steadiness of his steps and the cost of believing him too soon. I will not ask trust of you, he said. I will earn permission to ask. The sentence entered her more quietly than his public defense, and because of that, it reached deeper. Honoria looked past him to Cecily, who was now showing the folded letter to Lady Furbridge, with trembling reluctance that fooled no one who knew where to look. "Then begin by finding where that letter was written," she said. "Not by challenging every fool in this room." "Agreed. And by remembering that I am not waiting to be rescued. I am beginning to understand that you are usually several steps ahead of rescue." This time Honoria did smile, though only for a breath. Benedict saw it, and something unguarded touched his face before he mastered it. The set ended. He released her at once and stepped back. The room exhaled as though it had been held by a string. Before Honoria could return to Lady Westering, a footman passed near the wall and stumbled just enough to bring a folded slip within reach of her glove. He did not look at her. He did not stop. Honoria closed her fingers around the paper and turned her body so no one saw. Lady Westering was waiting with lemonade and a predator's patience. "Well?" the older lady asked. Honoria opened the slip beneath the shelter of her fan. The writing was hurried, uneven, and unsigned. The note was paid for by Lord Astley. Honoria felt the room tilt, then settle. She looked across Almack's to where Cecily stood pale in blue, surrounded by sympathy, while Lord Astley watched Benedict with the cold attention of a gambler, counting another man's purse. The scandal had changed shape. It was no longer only jealousy, it had money behind it. And money, Honoria knew, rarely acted alone. By the following afternoon, the slip from Almack's had become heavier than any formal accusation. Honoria had read it so often that the uneven words seemed pressed into her mind. The note was paid for by Lord Astley. It was not proof. Lady Westering had said so twice, once with impatience and once with pity. It was a thread, and threads could snap if pulled by frightened hands. Still, threads led somewhere. This one led to Harcourt House, where the families gathered beneath painted ceilings and ancestral portraits that had witnessed generations of marriages, made for land, rank, and survival. Honoria arrived with Lady Westering, not with her father. The Earl of Selwyn had objected so sharply that even the footman at the door had looked pained. Honoria had answered him in the hall before the carriage was called. "If my name is to be repaired, damaged, exchanged, or buried, I will be present to hear the terms." Her father had said, "You are overwrought," she had replied. "No, Papa, I am finished being absent from decisions that wound me." Now she sat in the blue drawing-room at Harcourt House, with Lady Westering beside her, and Benedict standing near the mantel, one arm resting at his back, his face controlled into that cold, ducal stillness London mistook for certainty. Lord Astley had taken the chair nearest the fire without waiting to be asked, as if possession of a cushion might improve possession of the room. He was a handsome man whose elegance had begun to fray at the edges. His waistcoat was fine, but too bright. His smile was polished but restless. Cecily sat beside him in pale muslin, her eyes lowered, her gloved hands folded like a saint in a painting. The Earl of Selwyn stood near the window, rigid with the strain of being caught between outrage and calculation. No one spoke until Benedict did. "Lord Astley, you requested this meeting." "I requested justice," Lord Astley said. "My daughter has been placed in an intolerable position." Lady Westering made a soft sound. "Most of us have, but pray continue." Cecily's lashes fluttered. "Please, Lady Westering, I don't want anyone to quarrel." Honoria looked at her cousin and felt, not anger first, but amazement. Cecily could still shape a room with softness. She knew exactly when to lower her voice, and when to tremble. She had learned that fragility, when worn correctly, could command more protection than truth. Lord Astley leaned forward. "His Grace was found in a private room with my daughter moments before his wedding. Whatever explanations may be invented afterward, society knows what it saw." "Society saw very little," Benedict said. "It has made up the rest. Society saw enough." "My daughter's prospects are imperiled." The Earl of Selwyn exhaled. "No one disputes the delicacy of Miss Astley's position." Honoria turned her head slowly. "I dispute the convenience of it." Her father frowned. "Honoria, If delicacy means that Cecily may wound me and then be carried from the field because her gloves are prettier, I dispute it entirely. Cecily's eyes filled at once. I never wanted this. Lady Westering set down her cup. My dear, wanting is rarely necessary when one has arranged well. Lord Astley's face hardened. I will not have my daughter insulted. Then you should not have brought her to a room full of people she insulted first, Lady Westering replied. Benedict looked at Honoria then, not to silence her, not to rescue her, but to see whether she wished to speak again. The difference steadied her. There is a note, Honoria said. Lord Astley did not blink. Cecily did. A note brought me to the vestry. A second note brought His Grace there. Both used the same phrase. Before the bells. Cecily pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. That was something we said when we were children. Anyone in the family might know it. Anyone in the family did not also ask Mercy Pike how to reach the vestry by the service passage. Cecily's eyes lifted. For one brief instant, the softness sharpened. A seamstress is hardly a proper witness. Benedict's voice cut in, low and cold. Miss Pike is under my protection. She is as under my roof, the Earl of Selwyn said, stung. Benedict did not look away from Cecily. Then let your roof be worthy of her honesty. Silence followed. It was not loud, but it changed the room. Honoria saw Cecily understand that Benedict was no longer moving to contain scandal around her tears. He was looking through them. Lord Astley recovered first. This is absurd. A frightened servant, a childish phrase, and a bride's wounded pride do not erase what occurred. If His Grace values honor, he must do right by Cecily, by marrying her, Lady Westering said. Let us not hide vulgar ambition beneath clean linen. By restoring what he compromised, Lord Astley snapped. Benedict's expression did not change. I did not compromise Miss Astley. She entered a room under false pretenses and created an appearance intended to injure Lady Honoria. Cecily stood, suddenly pale enough to quiet even Lady Westering. You can't mean that. Benedict turned to her fully. I do. You know I cared for you. The words trembled. You knew it, and you weren't cruel until she saw us. Honoria felt the room waiting for pain to cross her face. She gave it none. Benedict's jaw tightened. Do not mistake my politeness for encouragement. Cecily's tears spilled then, beautiful and precise. I'm ruined, and you speak of politeness. Lord Astley rose. Enough. Selwyn, surely you see the only path. Lady Honoria withdraws from London for a period. His Grace announces an understanding with Cecily. In time, society forgets the disorder of the first arrangement. Honoria heard the words as if from a great distance. Withdraws understanding. Forgets, there it was. Not a scandal to be solved, but a woman to be removed. Her father did not answer at once. That hesitation struck harder than refusal would have done. Honoria looked at him, and in that pause she saw the ugly arithmetic of rank. A duke saved, a cousin married, a daughter hidden until people tired of laughing. Papa, she said. The Earl looked away first. We must consider what preserves the family. Benedict moved from the mantel. No marriage involving my name will be discussed while Lady Honoria is treated as debris from a broken agreement. Lord Astley barked a humorless laugh. Your Grace, sentiment does not become you, nor does extortion become you. The word entered the room like a dropped blade, clean and shocking. Lord Astley's colour changed. Cecily stopped crying. Lady Westering leaned back, suddenly very attentive. Benedict continued. At Almack's last night, a message reached Lady Honoria. It stated that the note which drew her to the vestry was paid for by you. Lord Astley's mouth tightened, then loosened into contempt. Anonymous malice. Beneath notice, her saps. Benedict's eyes were steady. But my steward visited 3 establishments this morning, where gentlemen paid debts they do not wish their wives or daughters to understand. Your name appeared in one ledger. By the time my man returned with the solicitor, the page had been removed. The Earl of Selwyn stared. A gambling debt. Lord Astley gave him a furious look. Many gentlemen play cards. Many gentlemen lose, Lady Westering said. Only the desperate sell their daughters as remedies. Cecily's mask faltered. Papa. For the first time, Honoria wondered how much Cecily knew, and how much she had guessed only after ambition had opened the door. Lord Astley's voice grew silky. "Careful, Lady Westering. Accusations without proof stain the accuser." "Then it is fortunate," Honoria said, rising, "that I am no longer afraid of stains." Every face turned toward her. She had not planned to stand. Yet sitting felt too much like consent. "I will not withdraw from London, so that Cecily may step into the life prepared for me. I will not allow Mercy Pike to be called improper, because she saw what gentle people wished hidden. I will not permit my humiliation to be used as a dowry." Cecily's face hardened beneath the tears. "You always did think everything belonged to you." Honoria looked at her. "No. I believed what I tended might be safe from the people I loved." The words reached Cecily. They hurt her. Honoria saw it, and that hurt more than victory should have. Cecily moved toward the window when the others began speaking over one another. Honoria followed, drawn by the unfinished thing between them. Their skirts brushed near the curtains, close enough for privacy, visible enough for propriety. Cecily's tears had dried. Without them, she looked older. "You planned the wedding beautifully," she whispered. "I only changed the bride." Honoria felt the sentence strike, then settle. It was not rage that answered. It was clarity. "You changed yourself into someone I no longer know." Cecily's lips trembled, but no tear came. "You had everything. The name, the money, the Duke. Even when you didn't want him, you had him. You do not know what I wanted. I know you never had to beg for a place." Honoria looked back toward the room, at her father, avoiding her eyes, at Lord Astley measuring escape. Benedict watching not with ownership, but with alarm he was trying not to show. "I am begging now," she said quietly. "Not for a place, for the truth." Cecily flinched. Lord Astley called her name before she could answer. The private moment vanished. Benedict stepped into the center of the room. "No understanding will be announced. No engagement will be transferred. No servant will be silenced. My solicitor will review the missing ledger page, the agency record for the false footman, and the forged notes." Lord Astley smiled thinly. "You have nothing." At that moment, the door opened, and Benedict's secretary entered with a note in his hand. His face was grave. "Your Grace, Mr. Calder sent word from the solicitor's office. The clerk who handled Lord Astley's account has disappeared, and the ledger page with him." Lord Astley did not move. Cecily closed her eyes. Honoria felt the room tilt toward a darker truth. Benedict looked at her across the distance, and this time he did not ask her to wait. He asked the room to hear him. "Then someone has just confirmed there was something worth stealing." The morning after Lord Astley's clerk disappeared, Harcourt House opened its doors to Honoria, with the caution of a fortress admitting a witness. Not a guest, not a bride, a witness. Lady Westering sat beside her in the carriage all the way from Brook Street, cane across her knees, saying nothing until they turned into Grosvenor Square, and the black railings of the Duke's London residence came into view. "Remember, my dear," she said, "a man may be sincere and still be accustomed to arranging the room around himself." Honoria looked at the windows of Harcourt House, tall and bright beneath a pale sky. "I know, do you?" I returned his ring. A gesture. I refused to leave London. A decision. Lady Westering tapped the cane once against the carriage floor. "Today will require both." Benedict received them in the smaller library, not the blue drawing room where Lord Astley had tried to trade shame for marriage. The choice mattered. This room held work, not performance. Ledgers lay stacked on a long table. A decanter remained untouched on the sideboard. A clock ticked above the mantel with stern indifference. The door had been left wide until Lady Westering entered. And even then, Benedict waited for her to choose her chair before he closed it halfway, leaving enough space for propriety and enough privacy for truth. Honoria noticed the balance. She noticed everything now. Benedict bowed. "Lady Westering, Lady Honoria." "Your Grace," Honoria said. Lady Westering sat near the window. "Proceed, Aldermere." "I am old, but I dislike being made older by suspense." Benedict's mouth softened for less than a second. Then he turned to Honoria. "Before we examine anything, There is something I must say plainly. Her fingers closed around the handle of her reticule. Then say it. If I announced an engagement to Miss Astley by tonight, the worst of the scandal would end within a week. The room seemed to grow colder. Lady Westering's gaze sharpened, but she did not speak. Honoria kept her face still. Would it? For the public, yes. They would call it unfortunate passion, then romantic inevitability. Your father would resent the insult, but accept the restoration of family connection. Lord Astley would be satisfied. Miss Astley would be protected by my name. You would be pitied for a season, perhaps two, then politely forgotten. He said the words without flinching, which made them more terrible. They were not an offer. They were an execution described accurately. And if you stand with me, Honoria asked, then every drawing room in London will remain interested. Men who owe Lord Astley money or favours may interfere. Women who prefer Miss Astley's tears to your composure will call you vindictive. Your father may attempt to remove you from town. The gossip sheets will not stop until the truth becomes more profitable than the lie. Honoria looked at him across the table of ledgers. Then why not choose peace? Benedict did not answer at once. Outside the door, a footman's tread passed and faded. Lady Westering became utterly still. At last, Benedict said, because peace purchased with your erasure would make me unworthy of my name. The words were quiet. They did not ask for admiration. That was why they unsettled her. Honoria had taught herself to resist grand speeches. This was not grand. It was grave. Your name, she said. Or me? He accepted the correction, both. But if I must choose which one teaches me the other, it is you. Lady Westering looked down, as if hiding approval would be charitable. Honoria turned toward the ledgers before her expression could betray her. Then let us see what Lord Astley thought worth stealing. Benedict gestured to the documents. These are not the missing ledger. They are copies of carriage hire, agency correspondence, and household temporary staff lists. My steward retrieved what he could before doors began closing. And the clerk, still missing, not harmed, as far as we know. Paid to vanish, most likely. Poor men do not vanish, unless rich men make staying more frightening than leaving, Honoria said. Benedict looked at her. Yes, it was a small word, but it carried respect. They worked for nearly an hour, though work was too orderly a word for the tense examination of names, dates, seals, and half-torn receipts. Lady Westering watched, occasionally asking a question that cut through 3 layers of masculine assumption. Honoria found the first inconsistency. A temporary footman listed for Harcourt House had been paid under the name Thomas Reed, but the agency mark beside it was not the usual one. Benedict found the second. The same mark appeared on a carriage account connected to Lord Astley's club. Lady Westering found the third by doing nothing more than holding a torn slip to the light. This paper was removed from a larger sheet, she said. A careless thief leaves edges. A frightened one tears. Benedict took the slip only after she handed it to him. Honoria stepped closer, careful of the space between herself and the Duke. The torn fragment contained 3 visible entries. One was incomplete. One was a number large enough to make even Lady Westering exhale through her nose. The third bore Lord Astley's name in a clerk's cramped hand, followed by a notation, settlement expected upon Harcourt Alliance. Honoria read it twice. The words did not change. Settlement expected, Harcourt Alliance. She felt Cecily's whisper at the curtains again. You planned the wedding beautifully. I only changed the bride. The wound altered shape. It became less personal and more monstrous. Cecily's envy had opened the door, but debt had stood behind her, counting the silver. He needed her married into this house, Honoria said. Benedict's face had gone cold. Yes. Not because she loved you. No. Because your money would purchase his silence elsewhere, and his survival. Honoria looked at the torn slip until the ink blurred. She had been prepared to find cruelty. She had not been prepared to find accounting. A woman's name, she said slowly, reduced to a line in a debt book. Benedict's voice lowered. That is what I will not allow yours to become. Something moved between them then, quiet and dangerous, Not desire, not forgiveness. Something more difficult. Trust trying to breathe before it had permission. Lady Westering cleared her throat. Before either of you begins looking noble enough to alarm me, remember that this is motive, not proof of the forged note. Honoria folded her hands. Then we need the footman, the missing clerk, or Cecily's own connection to the writing desk. There is another matter, Benedict said. My secretary heard this morning that Miss Astley has begun telling select friends you and I met privately after Almack's. Honoria's head lifted. We did not? No. But the truth is not required for a useful rumor. Lady Westering muttered, The girl has talent. I dislike talent in fools. Benedict looked at Honoria. From this moment, every call I make upon you will be chaperoned, timed, and entered by the servants of both houses. Every meeting here will include Lady Westering or another witness acceptable to you. I will not give Miss Astley a shadow to dress as sin. Honoria studied him. You decided this before asking me. He went still. The old Benedict might have defended the efficiency of it. This one stopped, recognized the error, and inclined his head. You are right. I framed it as a decree. I should have asked whether those safeguards serve you. Lady Westering's eyes gleamed. Progress. Slow but recognizable. Honoria almost laughed, but the feeling caught in her chest instead. The safeguards serve me, she said, but hear my rule as clearly. No secret meetings. No dramatic rescue. No correction of my reputation by placing me in your debt. If we move honorably or not at all. Benedict held her gaze, agreed. And if you learn something that concerns my name, you tell me before you decide what I can endure. Agreed. Do not agree, only because remorse has made you generous today. It hasn't made me generous, he said. It has made me ashamed. There is a difference. The honesty struck too close. Honoria looked away first. Her gaze fell to his hand, resting near the torn slip, long fingers still. No attempt to touch hers, though they stood near enough that he could have done so, without witnesses calling it improper. Restraint had become his apology in motion. She reached into her reticule and drew out one of the recovered pearls. Not the one from Cecily's hem. One of the 3 she had picked from the chapel floor herself. You said the comb could be repaired. Benedict looked at the pearl, then at her face. Yes, take this to the jeweler. He did not move. Lady Honoria, are you certain? No. A faint, surprised breath left him. She closed her fingers around the pearl once, then opened them again. I am certain only that repair is not the same as return. The comb may be mended. That does not mean I have chosen to wear it. I understand. Do you? I am trying to understand before I deserve certainty. That answer, more than the apology, made her place the pearl in his palm. His hand remained open beneath hers. Their gloves did not touch for more than a heartbeat, yet the room seemed to hear it. Benedict closed his fingers only after she withdrew. Permission, she said. I know. Lady Westering rose with a rustle of silk. Excellent. A pearl has changed custody without a proposal. Society may yet survive. A knock came at the door. Benedict's secretary entered, grave and apologetic, carrying a folded paper. Your Grace, a message from Selwyn House. Lord Selwyn has received callers asking whether Lady Honoria's repeated visits to Harcourt House indicate that she has resumed a private understanding with you. Honoria laughed once. It was not amusement. Cecily moves quickly. Benedict's hand tightened around the pearl, but his voice stayed calm. Then we move cleaner. Honoria turned to Lady Westering. May I trouble you to write down the time of my arrival and departure? Already done. And note that the library door was partly open. My dear, I noted the angle. Benedict looked at Honoria, and in his eyes she saw not the cold assurance of a duke repairing a scandal, but a man learning the shape of her courage and making room for it. She will not stop, he said. Neither will I, Honoria replied. Then she took the torn ledger slip from the table and laid it beside the blotting paper, setting debt beside deceit. At last the lie had a price. Now they needed the hand that had paid it. The wedding desk had been moved back beneath the window as if innocence could be restored by returning furniture to its proper place. Honoria stood before it, The next morning, with Lady Westering on one side, Benedict on the other, and Mercy Pike near the door, looking as though she would rather face a room full of duchesses than one small locked drawer. Selwyn House had never felt less like home. Every polished surface seemed to reflect the morning of the broken ceremony. Every vase of fresh flowers seemed chosen by someone who believed fragrance could cover disgrace. Her father had objected to Benedict's presence with predictable fury. Lady Westering had answered by settling herself in the nearest chair and declaring, "If his grace ruins propriety under my eye, Selwyn, I shall strike him with my cane before your honour can faint." That had ended the argument, though not the Earl's displeasure. Now he paced in the adjoining breakfast room, close enough to interfere, too proud to be seen assisting. Honoria touched the desk lid. It was rosewood, delicate, and made for a lady's correspondence. She had used it for place cards, guest revisions, and notes to the florist. Cecily had sat at it the morning of the ceremony, smiling over white cards, as if helping her cousin prepare for joy. "The lock is marked," Benedict said. He did not reach past Honoria. He simply indicated the small brass plate with a glance. "Here, the scratch is fresh." Mercy leaned forward. "It wasn't so before, my lady. I dusted it that morning." Honoria pressed the drawer. It did not open. "The key is missing." "Not missing," Mercy said quickly. "I put it in the porcelain tray where you always keep it." The tray stood empty beside the inkstand. Honoria looked at the small hollow of white china and felt a sudden childish ache. A stolen key was such a little thing, yet the whole catastrophe had been built from little things. A childhood phrase, a scent, a borrowed passage, a servant no one remembered to question. "May I?" Benedict asked. Honoria nodded. He produced a narrow tool from his secretary and worked the lock with careful patience. It yielded after 3 soft clicks. Nothing dramatic happened. No confession sprang from the drawer. No justice emerged ready-made. Inside lay ribbon scraps, folded seating drafts, unused cards, and a packet of blotting sheets tied with blue thread. Blue. Cecily's color. Honoria lifted the packet herself. The top sheet showed faint impressions. Lady Westering took it to the light, her mouth tightening. Again with bells. The girl has no imagination, but she has persistence. Benedict moved beside her, keeping a proper distance from Honoria, though the room was cramped. "There is violet powder in the corner." He pointed to a pale dusting near the hinge. Mercy inhaled sharply. "Miss Astley carries a little silver scent box. It opens with powder as well as scent." She said liquid perfume marked gloves. Honoria saw Cecily as she had been that morning, leaning over the desk, pale sleeve brushing the place cards, leaving behind sweetness and ruin. "She wrote it here," Honoria said. "She sat where I sat and wrote the line that sent me to the vestry." The words were plain. The pain beneath them was not. She had expected to feel anger when proof arrived. Instead, grief came first. Grief for the hours she had spent arranging a day Cecily had already chosen to destroy. Grief for every smile she had trusted because it came from family. Grief for the fact that the trap had not been built in some dark alley, but at her own desk, among ribbons and wedding cards. Her vision blurred. She turned away, but Benedict saw enough. He did not step toward her. That restraint nearly undid her. "Lady Honoria," he said softly. "Don't be kind to me because you are guilty," she said. "I am not kind because of guilt." His voice remained low. "I am quiet because anything larger would insult what this cost you." Lady Westering looked down at the blotting paper, granting them the mercy of pretending not to hear. Honoria closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them. "I will not weep over a desk." "Then do not," Lady Westering said briskly. "Make it testify." Mercy bent beside the drawer and drew out a small wedge of paper caught beneath the side panel. "My lady, there is something here." Benedict took the desk knife. Only after Honoria handed it to him. He loosened the paper without tearing it. It was a torn corner from a larger sheet, folded so tightly it had wedged inside the drawer. There were only a few marks on it, but one was enough. A heavy downstroke from a capital B, too dark where the pen had paused, the same false confidence as the note that had summoned her. Honoria looked at Benedict. Your initial. Not my hand, no. She held the fragment beside his handwriting sample. The difference was clear now that she wanted to see it. His B began with restraint. Cecily's imitation pressed too hard, as if force could become authority. The door opened. The Earl entered before anyone could stop him. Have you finished rummaging? Lady Westering raised one brow. We are not rummaging, Selwyn. We are watching your daughter conduct the investigation you tried to forbid. He flushed. This obsession must end. Lord Astley is threatening to accuse members of this household of theft if we continue to spread servant tales. Mercy went white. Honoria turned. Then Lord Astley is frightened. He is angry. The two often share a coat. The Earl looked at Benedict. Your Grace, surely you see that involving servants will worsen matters. Benedict's expression cooled. The servants were involved the moment gentlefolk decided to use them as shadows. Mercy is not to be questioned without me, Honoria said, nor dismissed, nor frightened by Lord Astley's threats. Her father stared at her. You speak as if you command this house. No, I speak as if I have a conscience in it. Benedict folded the evidence carefully. My steward has located the man hired as Thomas Reed. Honoria's pulse struck. Where? At an inn outside Hounslow. He is alive, frightened, and unwilling to return, unless assured he will not be handed to Lord Astley. Mercy whispered, Poor man. The Earl scoffed. Poor. He stole a note from my daughter. Perhaps, Honoria said, or perhaps he was paid to carry one note and forced to steal another when the plan changed. We will not know by crushing him before he speaks. Benedict looked at her with something like fierce approval, quickly restrained. My steward is bringing him under protection. He should reach London by morning. Lady Westering tapped the blotting paper against her palm. Then tonight becomes important. Honoria turned. Tonight? Selwyn dinner, Lady Westering said. Your father informed half the family before deciding whether you were fit to attend. Miss Astley will be there. Lord Astley will be there. His Grace should be there if invited. Benedict looked to the Earl. The Earl looked as if he had swallowed vinegar. The invitation was issued before this latest spectacle. Then it stands, Honoria said. Her father's patience snapped. You will not turn my dining room into a tribunal. No, she replied. Cecily has been doing that since the chapel. I intend only to ask why she chose my desk as the judge's bench. Mercy made a small sound that might have been fear or admiration. Benedict set a linen-wrapped object on the desk. Before tonight, there is something I promised to return. Honoria knew before he opened it. The pearl veil comb lay against the linen, repaired only in part. The empty settings remained visible where the missing pearls had not yet been restored. One pearl, the one she had entrusted to him, had been secured with a fine silver brace, so delicate it looked like a line of frost. The jeweler can repair the rest once you choose, Benedict said. I asked him to stop there. Why? Because mending what is broken without your consent would be another form of presumption. Honoria stared at the comb. She had thought she could not bear to see it altered. Yet, the single repaired pearl did not pretend the damage had never happened. It simply held one wounded place together. She picked it up. Her fingers trembled once. Thank you. You need not wear it. I know. The words mattered because he had made them true. She wrapped the comb again and placed it in her reticule, not as ornament, not as promise, but as evidence that broken things could refuse to be finished by the person who broke them. A footman appeared at the door, his gaze fixed carefully on the floor. Lady Honoria, Miss Astley's maid, has delivered a message. Miss Astley looks forward to dining with family this evening, and hopes old affection may soften present misunderstandings. Honoria felt the old pain, then the newer steadiness. Tell the maid I received it. The footman bowed and withdrew. Lady Westering's smile was thin. Old affection, how sentimental, how poisonous. Benedict's gaze remained on Honoria. You do not have to face her tonight. Yes, Honoria said. I do, because of proof, because if I do not sit at that table, she will sit there in my absence and call it mercy. The Earl looked though he wished to object, but the evidence lay between them now, quiet and stubborn. Honoria closed the desk drawer. The little click sounded final. "Let her come to dinner," she said. "Let her wear white, blue, or tears if she likes. This time she will not find me waiting outside a door she has locked from within." By 7 that evening, Selwyn House had dressed itself for civility, with the desperation of a woman powdering over tears. The dining room shone beneath candlelight. Silver flashed along the table. White roses, salvaged from the wedding breakfast that had never become a wedding breakfast, stood in crystal vases between the place settings. Honoria noticed that at once. The flowers had browned faintly at the edges, no matter how carefully the stems had been cut again. Some things could be arranged beautifully, and still reveal they had survived a ruin. She entered on Lady Westering's arm, wearing deep green silk without jewels, and with her hair pinned plainly. The repaired pearl comb remained in her reticule. She would not place it in her hair, while Cecily sat across from her wearing innocence like borrowed lace. The guests rose as she entered. Family elders, 2 cautious cousins, Mr. Calder, Benedict's solicitor, present under the polite fiction of dining with the Earl. Lady Westering's expression suggested she would have preferred a courtroom if England allowed women to design useful rooms. Benedict stood near the mantel, dark and still, and bowed to Honoria as if the entire room were watching it was. Honoria returned the bow with a slight inclination of her head. Not forgiveness. Not dismissal. Recognition. Then Cecily entered. She wore white muslin, soft as a chapel veil, with a pale ribbon threaded through her hair. Honoria knew that ribbon. She had selected it herself for the wedding flowers, a narrow satin strip meant to tie the small pew arrangements nearest the altar. For 1 second, her breath caught. Cecily had taken another relic and made it decoration. Lord Astley followed his daughter, composed in evening dress, his smile thin and bright. The Earl of Selwyn moved forward too quickly. "We shall dine at once," he said, as if soup could prevent truth from rising. The dinner began with turtle soup, white wine, and sentences so careful they might have been handled with tongs. No one mentioned the chapel. No one mentioned Almack's. No one mentioned the vanished clerk or the false footman. That only made every spoon, every glance, every polite request for salt feel like part of a trial. Cecily sat opposite Honoria, her eyes lowered to her plate. Whenever anyone spoke too sharply, she flinched just enough to be noticed. Benedict observed it with cold attention. Honoria observed him observing it, and wondered how she had once mistaken silence for indifference in a man who saw so much and acted too late. When the servants withdrew after the final course, and the ladies did not separate from the gentlemen, the pretense ended. Lady Westering put down her glass. "Selwyn, if we are to continue pretending this dinner is ordinary, I shall expire of boredom before scandal can finish its work." The Earl's face tightened. "Lady Westering, no. We are all here because Miss Astley wept in the correct rooms, and Lady Honoria refused to vanish from them. Let us not insult the candles by calling it family harmony." Cecily lifted her handkerchief. "I don't want to be the cause of pain." Honoria looked at the ribbon in her cousin's hair. "Then why wear trophies from it?" The room stilled. Cecily's hand rose to the ribbon with perfect confusion. "This, I didn't think. It was only pretty. You often do not think at the most convenient moments." Lord Astley's chair scraped softly. "Lady Honoria, your bitterness is understandable, but my daughter is not on trial." "Then why has everyone been asked to judge me?" Benedict's voice entered, quiet and firm. Lord Astley turned toward him. "Your Grace, you above all should be careful. My daughter's name has been injured enough." Benedict did not move. "By whom?" Cecily's eyes filled. "Must you be cruel to me in front of everyone? I am asking a question." "You kissed me." The words came out clear, not loud, clear enough to cross the polished table and enter every ear. Honoria felt the room tighten around her. Cecily continued, her voice trembling now that the blade had landed. "You may say I misunderstood, and perhaps I did, perhaps I was foolish. But when you took my wrists, you did not pull away at once. You looked at me as if you felt something, and then Honoria opened the door. Benedict's face went very still. It was the stillness of a man refusing anger, because anger would serve the wrong person. That is false. It's not false to me. Lord Astley spread one hand as if sorrow had forced him into dignity. There, the matter cannot be more plain. A young lady of good family has been compromised before witnesses, then publicly humiliated by denial. If His Grace has any honor, he will announce an engagement tonight. The Earl of Selwyn said nothing. That silence struck Honoria with old pain, but it did not knock her down. She had grown used to discovering where people stood by watching where they refused to move. Benedict looked at Honoria, not with appeal, but with warning that he was about to speak. She gave the smallest nod. He turned back to Lord Astley. No engagement will be announced. Cecily made a broken sound. Then I am ruined. No, Honoria said, rising slowly. You are exposed to the possibility of consequence. That is not the same. How can you speak so coldly? Cecily whispered. Because if I speak warmly, you will call it forgiveness and use it to climb. A murmur moved around the room. Lady Westering's eyes gleamed. The Earl said, Honoria, sit down. No, Papa. She looked at him, and something in her voice made even he fall silent. I was seated while my name was discussed. I was seated while my future was weighed against Cecily's tears. I will stand now. Mr. Calder cleared his throat. There is a witness, my lord. Lord Astley's head turned sharply. A witness to what? Benedict answered. To the delivery of the note. Cecily's face changed by less than an inch. Honoria saw it. So did Lady Westering. The dining room door opened and Mr. Crane brought in a young man in plain clothes, his fair hair combed with anxious care. He looked younger without livery, almost boyish, and fear had drawn his shoulders inward. Mercy stood in the hall beyond him, pale but present, as if she had insisted on seeing that he entered a room alive, and left it the same. Benedict spoke before anyone else could. This man is under my protection. He will not be threatened, dismissed, struck from employment, or handed to any creditor, constable, or family agent for speaking truthfully here. Lord Astley laughed once. You have rehearsed generosity beautifully. Benedict's gaze hardened. I have learned the cost of delay. Honoria stepped toward the young man, stopping several feet away so he would not feel crowded. What is your name? He swallowed. William Darrow, my lady. Thomas Reed was the name they told me to give. Who told you? His eyes darted toward Lord Astley, then Cecily. He trembled so visibly that Honoria's anger softened around its edges. You are not here to please me, she said. You are not here to please His Grace. You are here to tell the truth, and leave with it still belonging to you. The young man blinked. Benedict looked at her, with an expression he quickly mastered. William drew a breath. A gentleman's man found me near Covent Garden. Said there was wedding work, and better pay than carrying trunks. I was to wear Harcourt livery and deliver a note to His Grace in the vestry. Lord Astley said, any man may invent such nonsense for coin. Lady Westering snapped, then let him invent without. Assistance. Honoria kept her eyes on William. Did you deliver a note to me? Yes, my lady. I was told to pass near you in the corridor. If you had a paper in your glove, I was to take it. The Earl exhaled sharply. You stole from my daughter. William's face crumpled with shame. Yes, my lord, I was paid to. I didn't know what it meant. They said it was a lady's prank. I swear I didn't know. Honoria felt no triumph, only a sad, steady confirmation. Who paid you? I never saw the gentleman's face clear. But later, at the inn, I heard Lord Astley's name. They said his lordship would send the rest when the page was safe. Lord Astley rose. This is slander from a bought vagabond. Benedict moved one step and the room remembered he was a duke. Sit down. 2 words, not shouted. Lord Astley did not sit, but he stopped. Honoria asked the question that mattered. William, the note sent to me said, come to the vestry before the bells. Who gave you that phrase? William's gaze moved at last to Cecily. She had gone very pale. I don't want to say wrong, then say right, Honoria replied. Cecily whispered, William, you mustn't let them frighten you. It was the wrong sentence. Too familiar. Too quick. William flinched toward her voice. Everyone saw it. Benedict's eyes darkened. Lady Westering leaned forward. Honoria felt the room gather around the truth. "Did Miss Astley speak to you?" she asked. William stared at the floor. "Yes, my lady." Cecily stood. "He's confused." William shook his head, and once he began, the words came faster. "She told me the line, before the bells. She said it was important because you'd believe it. She wrote it first, then made me copy the direction. She said if anyone asked, I was to say His Grace sent it." Cecily made no sound. That was more damning than tears. Her silence did what Honoria's accusations could not. It stripped the performance from the room. Lord Astley's face had turned grey beneath the candlelight. The Earl of Selwyn looked at Honoria then, truly looked, as if he had finally found his daughter standing somewhere beyond his authority. Honoria did not look away. "Thank you, William," she said. "You may wait in the hall with Mercy. No one will trouble you." Benedict nodded to Mr. Crane, who led the young man out. Only when the door closed did Cecily speak. "I was afraid." Her voice was small now, stripped of polish. "Papa said everything would be lost. He said Honoria would still have choices. I wouldn't." Honoria felt the sentence pass through her and find no easy place to rest. Pity tried to rise. Memory stopped it. "So you took mine." Cecily looked at her, and for the first time her tears seemed real. "You don't know what it is to have nothing." Honoria touched the reticule at her side, feeling the hard shape of the broken comb within it. "I know what it is to discover that everything promised to you can be traded by people who call it love." No one spoke. Then Benedict stepped into the silence, not beside Cecily, not before Honoria, but slightly behind Honoria's shoulder, close enough to support without blocking her from view. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the dining room, "at Harcourt House, every person who repeated this lie will hear how it was made." Lord Astley's mouth tightened. "You would make this public?" Benedict looked at Honoria. She understood the question he did not ask. Would she endure it? Would she choose it? She answered before anyone else could. "Yes," she said. "Not because I wish to be watched. Because I am finished being misrepresented in rooms where I am absent." Benedict inclined his head, then turned back to the table. "Then London shall be invited to hear the truth." By noon the next day, Harcourt House no longer looked like a residence. It looked like a verdict waiting to be spoken. The blue drawing room had been arranged with deliberate severity, not for comfort, but for witness. Chairs formed a wide half-circle, beneath the portraits of dead Harcourts, who seemed to look down with the stern patience of people who had survived their own scandals, and now expected the living to manage better. Lady Westering sat near the centre with her cane across her knees. "Mr. Calder stood beside a small table where papers, folded notes, the torn ledger slip, the blotting sheet, and a square of pale blue silk had been laid in exact order. The Earl of Selwyn stood stiffly near the window, as if daylight itself accused him. Lord Astley had arrived red-eyed and smiling too much. Cecily sat in white again, but without the ribbon. Honoria noticed its absence. So did everyone who had seen it at dinner. The room contained only those whose words mattered to London. Family elders, 2 patronesses, Mr. Calder, Lady Westering, and 3 people who had repeated the first gossip sheet with such enthusiasm that Benedict had invited them to hear its correction. No one mistook the invitation for courtesy. Honoria entered last, not because she wished for drama, but because Lady Westering had insisted that truth should not arrive before its audience had finished, pretending it was calm. She wore dark blue silk and no jewels. In her reticule rested the repaired pearl comb, still incomplete, still unworn. Benedict stood when she entered. So did every gentleman in the room. This time no one looked away from her too quickly. That was new. Benedict bowed to her, not possessively, not triumphantly, but with a gravity that acknowledged she had come here to stand in the light, again after others had tried to dim it. "Lady Honoria," he said. "Your Grace," he did not ask whether she was ready. She had told him the night before that readiness was a luxury rarely granted to women whose reputations had been handled by others. Instead, he turned to the room. "We are here because a lie was made in private and distributed in public. Its correction will therefore be witnessed. Lord Astley gave a short laugh. A ducal performance. How impressive. Lady Westering looked at him. Do save your courage, Astley. You will require it when the facts begin. Mr. Calder lifted the first paper. He spoke briefly, without theatrical force. The forged note to Honoria had used the phrase before the bells. The message to Benedict had used the same phrase. The phrase belonged to Honoria and Cecily's childhood. Mercy Pike had seen Cecily near the sewing-room passage and the wedding desk. The blotting sheet from that desk bore impressions matching the false summons. A pearl from Honoria's mother's comb had been found in Cecily's blue hem. William Darrow, hired under a false name, had confessed to delivering one note and stealing another. Payment had passed through a servant connected with Lord Astley. The torn ledger slip named Lord Astley's debt and the expected Harcourt alliance. Each fact was placed on the table like a stone. Not one was large enough to crush by itself. Together they built a wall no tears could pass through. Cecily remained silent until the blue silk was unfolded. Then her face tightened. A pearl in a hem proves only that I was in the same room when Honoria dropped it. No, Honoria said. Every head turned toward her. Her voice was calm, but not soft. It proves you were close enough to my ruin to carry part of it away. Cecily's lips parted. Lord Astley cut in. This is monstrous. My daughter has been frightened into contradictions by pressure from a duke who wishes to repair his convenience. Benedict looked at him without expression. My convenience would have been marrying her. The room went still. Honoria felt the sentence land, felt its ugly truth ripple through the polished air. Benedict did not spare himself from it. That would have been the simpler public path. A romantic scandal, a hasty engagement, a few weeks of whispers, and society would have forgiven what it enjoys most when dressed prettily enough. Cecily's eyes filled. Then why didn't you? Benedict turned to her. Because you built your rescue out of Lady Honoria's erasure. You let me kiss you. The last twist came sharp and desperate. Cecily rose, trembling, her face wet now with tears that seemed less practiced, because fear had reached them first. You can speak of notes and ledgers, but you stood there. You knew I cared for you. You didn't hate me in that room. The words struck the audience exactly as she intended. They shifted from proof to feeling, from ink to ambiguity. Honoria felt the old chill of the vestry return. Benedict's face did not change, but his eyes did. He looked toward Honoria first, and there was apology in the pause before he spoke. I did not love you, Miss Astley. I did not choose you. I did not invite your confidence, and I did not return your kiss. Cecily began to speak, but he continued, colder now. But I failed Lady Honoria. I failed her because I remained long enough for you to stage the appearance. I failed her because when the door opened, I thought first of controlling scandal rather than protecting the woman harmed by it. That fault is mine. I will not hide it beneath your lie. The room received that confession differently from the evidence. Evidence exposed Cecily. This humbled Benedict. Honoria had not known she needed to hear it before witnesses until the words had been spoken. Her throat tightened. She did not allow tears. Tears had been overemployed in this affair. Lady Westering looked satisfied in the ruthless way of a woman who had just seen a man become more useful by becoming less proud, Mr. Calder then produced the signed statement from William Darrow, witnessed by Lady Westering's man and Benedict's steward. Lord Astley's protest faltered when the payment name was read aloud. One patroness turned her face away from him. Another whispered, "Good heavens," not with delight this time, but with social calculation reversing direction. The Earl of Selwyn looked older by several years. Honoria watched him, and the child in her waited for him to defend her, even now late as winter fruit. He did not speak until Lady Westering said, "Selwyn, your daughter is standing in a room full of evidence that she told the truth. Have you nothing to contribute besides posture?" The Earl flinched. Pride fought shame across his face. Shame won, but not beautifully. "Honoria," he said, and his voice roughened. "I should have believed you before I feared for the family. The apology was not enough. It could not repair the chapel, the carriage, the command to disappear. Yet it was spoken before the very people he had wished to impress, and that gave it weight. Honoria inclined her head. Yes, Papa, you should have. He bowed his head. Lord Astley moved towards Cecily, but Benedict's voice stopped him. You will not remove your daughter as though this room has wronged her. Lord Astley turned, pale with fury. You cannot command my family. No, Benedict said, but I can command who is received in mine. Lord Astley, Harcourt House is closed to you. My solicitor will notify your creditors that my name is not available to settle your losses. Any gossip sheet repeating falsehoods about Lady Honoria will receive correction signed by me, Lady Westering, and the witnesses present. Cecily sank back into her chair. And me? She whispered. For the first time, no one rushed to rescue her tears. Lady Westering answered before Benedict could. You will go to Bath with your aunt and discover whether repentance improves your complexion. Cecily looked at Honoria then, not with hatred alone, but with something hollow beneath it. You have everything again. Honoria stepped forward. No, I have truth. It is not everything. It is only the place from which I may begin. The room was silent. Not the stunned silence of the chapel. A different silence, one that listened. Honoria drew the repaired comb from her reticule. The pearls lay incomplete against her palm. She held it where the witnesses could see it. I planned a wedding where every chair had a place, she said. Yet I discovered I had none. My cousin wrote the note. Lord Astley paid for the path that carried it. His grace delayed when he should have spoken. My father feared disgrace more quickly than he believed his daughter. Those are the facts. I will not be made smaller so that anyone here may feel less ashamed. Lady Furbridge, seated near the back, lowered her eyes. Mrs. Anstruther looked at the floor. Lady Westering's gaze shone. Benedict stood very still. When Honoria finished, he came forward only as far as the edge of propriety allowed. Lady Honoria, he said, his voice low but carrying, I cannot undo the mourning you were made to stand alone. If you refuse me now or forever, I will still defend your name wherever it is questioned. I ask nothing as payment for justice. Honoria looked at him and saw the difference at last between a duke offering rescue and a man offering witness. The first asked to be admired. The second remained even if refused. Then do not ask me here, she said. His breath caught almost imperceptibly. No, not in the room where truth had to be proved before it was believed. Not before people who came to watch correction. She closed her fingers around the comb. Ask me again where only truth can hear us. Benedict bowed his head, and when he looked back at her, the cold Duke London feared was gone for one unguarded instant. In his place stood a man who had lost the right to assume and been given only the possibility of earning. Then I will wait, he said, not as strategy, as honor. Honoria turned toward the door. This time, when London watched her leave a room, it did not see a bride abandoned, a woman humiliated, or a scandal waiting to be shaped by others. It saw Lady Honoria Selwyn walking out with the truth in her hand, and no one dared whisper until she was gone. 3 weeks after London learned to pronounce Honoria's name, with respect instead of speculation, Belwether Park received her beneath a sky so clear it seemed almost indecently gentle. The Hampshire air smelled of cut grass, old stone, and the last sweetness of early summer. No crowd waited at the chapel door. No rows of hungry faces leaned forward for scandal. No organ thundered over whispers disguised as concern. There were only a few carriages drawn up beside the gravel path, the quiet square tower of the estate chapel, and a line of white ribbons tied by hands that had not trembled. Honoria sat inside the small withdrawing room beside the chapel, looking into a mirror that had belonged to Benedict's grandmother. It was not a flattering mirror. It told the truth with silvered severity. Today that suited her. Mercy Pike stood behind her, fastening the final pin into Honoria's hair, with the solemn concentration of a woman entrusted with more than lace. She had entered Harcourt service 2 days earlier, not as a cast-off from Selwyn House, but with written references from Lady Westering and Benedict himself. The housekeeper at Bellwether Park had received her without suspicion, which had made Mercy cry in the laundry passage, where she thought no one would hear. Honoria had heard. She had let the girl have the privacy of those tears. "There, my lady," Mercy said now. "It will hold." Honoria looked at the pearl comb resting on the dressing table. The jeweler had restored every setting, but not perfectly. At Honoria's request, the repaired places remained slightly visible to anyone who knew where to look. The silver braces were fine, almost hidden among the pearls, yet they caught the light differently. Damage had not been erased. It had been honored and held. Mercy saw her looking. "Would you like me to place it?" Honoria touched the center pearl. "No, I will do it." Mercy stepped back at once. That obedience was not fear now, it was respect. Honoria lifted the comb with both hands. For a moment she saw another room, another morning, Cecily's fingers in her hair, the weight of expectation disguised as beauty. Then she saw the drawing room at Harcourt House, Benedict standing before witnesses and admitting his failure without asking to be spared from it. She saw Lady Westering's cane, Mercy's pale courage, William Darrow's trembling confession, her father's bowed head. She saw herself walking out with truth in her hand. Slowly, Honoria slid the comb into her hair. It settled without pain. Mercy smiled through wet eyes. "Your mother would be proud." Honoria looked at her reflection. "Today I think I may believe that." A knock sounded. Mercy opened the door, and the Earl of Selwyn stood outside in formal black, older than he had seemed at the first ceremony, and less certain of his right to enter any room where his daughter prepared to choose her future. "May I speak with Lady Honoria?" he asked. That mattered. Mercy looked to Honoria. "Yes," Honoria said. "Please give us a moment." Mercy slipped out, leaving the door partly open. The Earl stepped inside and stopped well short of her, as if distance had become part of his apology. "You look very like your mother." Honoria did not let the old sentence move her too quickly. "I used to want that to be enough." His mouth tightened. "I have thought often of what you said, that you were not a family crest." He lowered his gaze. "I made you feel like one." "Yes, Papa." The word was not cruel. That was what made it hard. The Earl drew a breath. "I feared disgrace more than I trusted you. I thought of Selwyn, of the name, of every foolish person who would whisper over tea. I did not think first of my daughter, standing alone in her wedding gown." Honoria turned from the mirror to face him. "No, you did not. Can you forgive me?" She looked at the man who had taught her duty, given her security, failed her in public, and now stood without command in his hands. Forgiveness, she had learned, was not a door flung open because someone knocked. Sometimes it was only the decision not to bar the house forever. "Not all at once," she said. His eyes closed briefly. "That is fair. But you may walk with me to the chapel door." He looked at her then, and the grief in his face was real. "Only to the door, only there. I will enter by my own choice." The Earl bowed his head. "Then I will be honored to walk as far as I am permitted." Outside, Bellwether Park held its breath in sunlight. Lady Westering waited near the chapel entrance in lavender silk, leaning on her cane like a general after victory. "Do not look so solemn, Selwyn," she said, as Honoria approached on her father's arm. "Your daughter has allowed you a ceremonial use. Many fathers receive less after behaving worse." The Earl surprised Honoria by accepting the rebuke with a faint, rueful bow. "Lady Westering, I am beginning to understand that I deserved several more of your speeches. Do not tempt me before prayers." Inside the chapel, only a small company waited. Lady Westering, Mr. Calder, a few Harcourt relations who had written respectful letters after the truth became known. Mercy stood at the back beside Mrs. Vale, no longer hiding behind a linen press. William Darrow was not present, but Benedict had secured him honest work, with a posting stable outside Reading and enough distance from Lord Astley's agents to begin again. Lord Astley himself had not been invited. His creditors had discovered that Harcourt money would not rescue him, and the doors that once opened at cards and clubs had begun to close with chilling politeness. Cecily had been sent to Bath under the watch of a widowed aunt who valued silence, church attendance, and plain mourning gowns. She had written one letter to Honoria. It contained no full apology, only one sentence that Honoria had read twice before putting it away. "I thought becoming you would feel like being loved." Honoria had not answered, not yet. Some silences were punishment, others were boundaries. Benedict waited near the altar, not as he had waited in London, armored by rank and cold control. Today he looked steady, but not untouchable. When he saw Honoria, the change in his face was so quiet that only she could have understood it. Relief, wonder, restraint. He did not move toward her, he let her come. At the chapel door her father stopped. His arm loosened. Honoria turned to him, kissed his cheek lightly and stepped away. No one guided her down the aisle. No one delivered her like property, or pushed her toward duty. She walked the short path herself, pearls steady in her hair, each step belonging to her before it belonged to anyone else. When she reached Benedict, he bowed his head. "Lady Honoria, Your Grace." A flicker of warmth touched his eyes. "Still Your Grace, until you earn otherwise." His mouth almost smiled. "Then I had better continue earning." The vicar opened his book, but Benedict lifted one hand gently. "Before we begin, may I ask one question?" The vicar looked startled. Lady Westering looked entertained. Honoria looked at Benedict. "You may." Benedict's voice lowered, but in the small chapel it carried. "Do you come because they expect it?" The question entered her like fresh air through a long closed room. No one had asked it on the first morning. No one had thought the brides will mattered once arrangements had been made. Honoria looked at the people gathered there, at her father near the door, at Mercy's clasped hands, at Lady Westering's fierce eyes, and finally at Benedict, who had learned not to mistake her silence for consent. "No," she said. "I come because I am no longer afraid to choose." Benedict's composure moved just enough. "Then I am the most fortunate man in England. You are the most accountable one." Lady Westering made a sound suspiciously like approval. Benedict bowed his head. Gladly, the vows were simple. That simplicity healed more than splendor could have done. Benedict promised honor without possession, protection without command, loyalty without convenience. Honoria promised truth, partnership, and a heart that would not make itself smaller to fit a title. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, there was no roar of applause, no frantic whispering, no scandal hunting for its next meal. There was only stillness, reverent and full. Benedict turned to her. He did not touch her until she gave the smallest nod. Then he took her gloved hand and kissed it first, not her mouth, as if even joy must ask permission. Honoria stepped closer. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm here." Only then did he kiss her. It was brief, tender, and entirely without performance. No one gasped. No one claimed it. No one turned it into evidence. It belonged to them because it had been chosen in truth. Afterward, outside the chapel, the small company gathered beneath the warm afternoon light. Letters had already begun arriving at Bellwether Park, some full of apology, others full of admiration from people who had once repeated lies and now wished to stand near correction. Honoria had read enough to know that society loved redemption almost as much as scandal, provided someone else paid the cost. She would not build her peace upon their approval. She would build it. Here, in a house where mercy could work without fear, where servants were not disposable shadows, where her father might learn to ask before arranging, where Benedict would never again call silence. Protection. As they crossed the chapel threshold, Benedict paused beside her. "The pearls held," he said. Honoria reached up and touched the comb. "Yes. Do you regret keeping the repaired marks visible?" "No. They remind me that being mended is not the same as pretending nothing happened." He looked at her with a tenderness so restrained, it felt stronger than any declaration. "Then we will remember properly." She slipped her hand through his arm. Across the lawn, Bellwether Park waited with open doors, not as a prize she had won from Cecily, not as a consolation for disgrace, but as a home she had chosen after truth made choosing possible. Behind them, the chapel bell began to ring. Honoria did not flinch. The sound no longer summoned her to a trap. It rang over grass, stone, and sunlight. It rang over the woman who had once gathered pearls from a cold chapel floor while London watched. It rang over the Duchess of Aldermere as she walked beside the man who had learned to stand with her, not before her, and the pearls in her hair remained steady, no longer scattered across stone.